action to legal counsel, and there is no other action to report at this time.
Thank you. Does anyone have any changes they'd like to make to the agenda? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion.
Second. Roll call.
Councilmember Henley,
Aye.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Councilmember Agramonte,
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, at this time, we're going to have public comment. Members of the public can comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. It is recommended that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Under state law, unless otherwise permitted under the Ralph M. Brown Act, the merits of the matters presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon by the City Council at this time. For items appearing on the agenda, the public will be invited to make comments at the time the item comes up for council consideration. Upon being acknowledged, please step to the podium and speak into the microphone and begin by stating and spelling your name. Mr. Brown.
Ken Brown, 1396 Lubick, in the city of Sonoma, the last house in the city. Thank you for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to see you all here. I'll be at the Women's March on Saturday, 10 o'clock in Sonoma Plaza. I hope I see all of you there. Sonoma Patient Group, my wife's company, will have a table, and we're looking forward to another wonderful turnout. I am now the president of the Sonoma Valley Cannabis Enthusiasts, and we will be having a meeting on January 21st at the community meeting room at 5 p.m. Hopefully, Mayor Harrington will be there among us. We're having a party on February 7th, also at the community meeting hall in the Springs, and you will all be invited. My wife's got a seminar, cannabis seminar for seniors and their caregivers. It is now the largest group that she speaks to and becomes members of Sonoma Patient Group. It's at Park Point Health Club, Studio B. The feature presenter is Dr. Marilyn Holter, a trained Harvard board-certified anesthesiologist with 40 years experience. I have flyers. I hope to see you there. I never even get close to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Ken.
And now for something completely different. David Brigode, 240 Del Rio Paseo. In the last city council campaign, one of the biggest issues, not the biggest issue, was affordable housing. And many candidates expressed a desire to do something to address this issue. And now is the time. The city council can identify suitable land for affordable housing, and that's been done through the housing element. But now it's time to step up to the plate and provide financing. The city has done relatively little on financing affordable housing since the redevelopment agency was taken away back in 2011. I provided members by email a white paper on potential municipal funding mechanisms to create affordable housing in Sonoma. Other jurisdictions are showing transfers from the general fund, transient occupancy tax allocations, commercial linkages fee. We need to step up because we're going to see potentially redevelopment 2.0 coming back, and we do have Proposition 1 that will be creating funding for affordable housing. So why is this important? The city has to demonstrate support. The city has to put money up front so that we can leverage other monies 3 to 4 times as much as the city puts up. But we need the city's indication that they're willing to support and some city money in order to make this thing happen. I urge the council to either conduct hearings. I'm told that we may have appointees now to the Housing Policy Committee. And delay in this matter means that we lose the ability to have anything into our 2019-2020 fiscal year budget, and we have multiple NOFA deadlines coming up. Housing financing delayed equals housing denied. Now, I must reveal that after 5 years of retirement, I have come out of retirement and I'm working for Habitat for Humanity of Sonoma County in Santa Rosa. I have to tell you that. As a housing developer, Habitat for Humanity Sonoma County has been greatly expanding its activities since the fire. It's a wildfire relief project. We have 4 units just about completed in Santa Rosa, 10 cottages in up in Santa Rosa again, 16 townhouses in Windsor, 20 coming up in southwest Santa Rosa, and we're eager to work with the city of Sonoma. We can bring to the table donations, we can bring in materials, we can bring in volunteers, we can bring in-kind activity, and we really want to work, we really want to bring you a project. We'd like to get some indication that if we go through all the work of identifying sites, trying to put a package together, that you would look at it kindly, that you would maybe tend to consider our proposal, and we just need that nod and a wink from you, and that we can get started on putting a package together for you to evaluate. So I hope to hear back from the council members as to how we can start pushing this whole thing forward.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Hi, council and staff. I'm Shauna Davis, 850 Donald Street, Sonoma, and my office is at 1051 Broadway here in Sonoma. And I just had a commentary regarding the Mesa Nave House, which is a nonprofit run by the League of Historic Preservation. And I know that I've been in communication with both city staff and council and commission. And I just wanted to share to the public that I was on the board in the past, and I have been a tenant renting the building, or I rent it for private events, special events, and recently we were told we could no longer rent the building for events, which I found very peculiar because they've hired an event coordinator. And to me, if you have an event coordinator, means you're looking to have events. And our events, we have several types, but one in particular, I had 24 events to book for a group, Road Scholar NPR, and book it on a consistent schedule. And they're very low impact, midweek, senior citizens, they all walk. And so I felt the impact to the building was quite minimal, but we were told no, we could not rent the building. And yet the league is talking about expanding to weddings and special events. So I know in the past when I was on the board, and I'm not on the board now, so I don't know if the objective or vision has changed, but you know, many of us were not in favor of weddings due to the impact on the property, to neighbors and parking. And I just thought that our group was a good group to use the Mesa Nave House, share the history of the house. And the group that comes to town, I have to say, when they land at the Sonoma Valley Inn, they walk to everything and they just love our mission, our barracks, the General Vallejo's home. They do the walking history tour of Sonoma. And I welcome any council to ever come and join them for lunch because they love meeting anyone that will come and talk to them about Sonoma. So with that said, in the good news, I have found a home for all of our events. The Sonoma Community Center has welcomed us to host our events. And also I just want to share that part of my business goal is to, when possible, rent from nonprofits to give them some of our income. And that was my pleasure renting from the Mesa Nave House, and it's now my pleasure to be renting at the community center. So I thank you for your time, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Harrington, distinguished members of City Council. My name is Tony Giraldi from Santa Rosa, and I'm the Secretary and Treasurer of the Miss Sonoma County Scholarship Organization. With us tonight is our Miss Sonoma County Tyler Avery Lewis and our Miss Sonoma County's Outstanding Teen, Pinkeo Ponza, and also our Executive Director for 28 years of the Miss Sonoma County Scholarship Program, Edie King, who's a resident here in Sonoma. And I'm also the General Manager of Sonoma County Airport Express, which is the primary sponsor of the Miss Sonoma County Scholarship Program. I'd like to thank the members of City Council for your support of the program. Our title holders, they've made numerous appearances here in Sonoma, and you've been very accommodating, and they've been along with you at some gatherings, and it's very much appreciated. I would like to invite the members of the City Council to our 72nd Miss Sonoma County Scholarship Competition coming up on March 2nd at the Spreckles Performing Arts Center in Rohnert Park. Normally we have between 20 and 30 elected officials from Sonoma County. You'll be introduced, and we'd love to have you there. Find out who our 73rd Miss Sonoma County will be, and our ninth Miss Sonoma County's Outstanding Teen. A little bit about the program real quick. Again, 73 years, 72 years. We've continuous. For 72 years, we've had a Miss Sonoma County, which is the longest continuous program in the Miss California organization. Our program is recognized for our title holders being so embedded in the community. A typical Miss Sonoma County makes close to 150 appearances a year. Miss Sonoma County's Outstanding Teen, because she's in school, there's a little bit less, about 70, 80 appearances. And it's a great program. It's a program that Sonoma County young women are very fortunate to have available to them. Again, we'd love to see you March 2nd for the competition, and thank you for your time. So.
Thank you for coming.
Hello, I'm Pinkeo Pongsa, Miss Sonoma County's Outstanding Teen 2018. I'm currently 16, I'll be 17 next month, and I'm a junior at Technology High School where I'm captain of our varsity basketball team. I'm also an ASB and Interact who works in partnership with Rotary. And I'm currently running for Student of the Year that works with the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, as well as running to be a board member of the California Association of Student Leaders. But on top of that, I am Miss Sonoma County's Outstanding Teen, and I'm so thankful to be here today. Honestly, I haven't been to Sonoma many times. I came here in 4th grade to visit the Mission and General Vallejo's home, as I'm sure many have. But I remember it being absolutely beautiful. It was my first time in Sonoma, and I was just mesmerized with the beauty, especially in the plaza. My friends and I remember we were running up and down the stairs of the outside amphitheater, and we were honestly jealous Rohnert Park didn't have a plaza like that. But I came back for the first time since 4th grade for the Veterans Memorial Day event hosted by Rotary, and it was absolutely heartwarming and beautiful, and I was so thankful that that was my first appearance back in Sonoma. And on the 4th of July, Tyler Avery and I came back for the 4th of July parade, and later that day, Gina Kuklis of the Sonoma County Board of Education actually gave us a tour of Sonoma, which was fascinating because I learned even more than I had before. We got to learn about cheese, and we got to learn more about all of the beauties of Sonoma. But my favorite trip out here, and one of my favorite appearances has been coming to the Lighting the Tree event in the plaza during the holiday season. It was a very spontaneous decision for us. We actually decided to come the day before, but it was by far my favorite. It was just so eventful, so much going on everywhere, and I absolutely was in love with it. Representing Sonoma County has been a dream, and I'm so thankful to have had this opportunity because growing up, I've always wanted to do more, but I wasn't quite sure where to start, so I'm very fortunate to have this opportunity to give me that platform. I would just like to thank Sonoma for giving me these opportunities, for allowing those who came before me and those who will come after me these opportunities, and for also having a baseball team that taught me how to throw a baseball because I didn't know how to throw a baseball. I'd also like to thank you for housing two of my favorite people in the whole world, Tiffany and Edie King. Edie's here with us. And in general, thank you for being such an amazing part of Sonoma County's history. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we normally take a photo, do we not? Okay.
One more speaker and then we'll.
Well, you beat me to the punch.
Mayor Harrington and the distinguished council members, I thank you for this, not only for your support, but your efforts in making mine and Pinkeo's year such a joyous one. And for those who don't know me, I am Tyler Avery Lewis, and I am the 72nd Miss Sonoma County and the second African American to hold this title. I hail from my hometown of Rohnert Park, and I am a lifetime Sonoma County member. And though Pinkeo mentioned everything that I was going to mention, I'd just like to say that being not only Miss Sonoma County, but being a part of this community as Sonoma County and being able to experience what you all do here in Sonoma has been such an amazing thing for me. I used to be so fearsome of going out of my little bubble, and now I've been able to venture outside of the bubble, and I've realized that the bubble that is Sonoma is an amazing bubble to be a part of. I started out my year as Miss Sonoma County in Sonoma, going to the Veterans Memorial, and that was an amazing opportunity. I'm grateful and thankful that you all allowed me to say the Pledge of Allegiance and just to be a part of that, because it's being that my dad was a veteran and that he had fought the good fight and eventually came out. I understand the price that is paid when you go out into the battlefield, and not only the price that is paid as a soldier, but the price that your family pays and, you know, the people, your friends who are surrounded by you. I'd also like to say that the 4th of July was one of my favorite events to be a part of, because I got to wear my favorite all-white dress. And just the fact that I got to learn so much about Sonoma and know the history and meet a lot of the people and experience what you all experience on a daily basis. And yes, the cheese is amazing. I also got to go to the Stompers game twice, and I got to sing the national anthem twice and throw the first pitch, which was really special to me because I had actually played baseball growing up, and baseball is actually my favorite sport, so thank you for that. And the tree lighting, I mean, who lights up a palm tree? Like, that's amazing. I was sitting there like, where's the tree? The tree? Oh, there's the tree. It was great. But overall, I just want to tell you that being Miss Sonoma County has been not only a privilege and an honor, but it's been something that I felt like I didn't deserve. And I still feel like I don't deserve this position. And I say that because not a lot of people are fortunate to have been able to have the tour of a lifetime. Not everybody gets to take a step into Sonoma County, and not everybody gets to take a step into Sonoma, the city, or the town. But thank you so much, and I entreat you to come to our event on March the 2nd and see me and Pinkeo and I, proper grammar, hand off our crowns. And I'd also entreat you, can we please have a picture?
Absolutely. Thank you for coming. Should we
Thank
step
you.
down now?
So it seems like we're a little bit off on the color palette today.
As long as you're in the middle.
I'm a little bright.
Looks good. I like it.
Yeah, we'll go edges.
Would you scoot this way so we're not getting the computers and stuff?
Keep going all the way.
Okay,
Ready?
1, 2, 3.
One more? One more. Thanks, man. Great. Thank you.
I always enjoy seeing these ladies every year. Is there anyone else who'd like to make public comment? Seeing none, I will close the public comment. Are there any meeting dedications?
Maybe before that, Mary Harrington, just 2 brief items to respond. So Mr. Burgode, who was speaking about housing, there is a housing subcommittee, and that group that at this point is Vice Mayor Harvey and Councilmember Hunley, and so they will be looking at a variety of these housing issues, and some of these items are already on the council's plate. And then I do know the Mesa Nave House and council's aware that the Mesa Nave House is coming forward to Planning Commission to clarify their use permit in terms of rentals, et cetera. And my understanding at this point is they are deciding kind of to not move forward with any rentals until they get the clarification and some of the technical cleanup that's necessary with the use permit process. So just some additional information to respond.
Thank you. Are there any meeting dedications?
There is. I have a meeting dedication for Wayne T. Wyrick Sr. Wayne T. Wyrick Sr., 85, longtime Sonoma resident, volunteer firefighter, military veteran, and local business owner, died on December 16, 2018 in his home. Wayne joined and enthusiastically served as a volunteer fireman for more than 24 years. Wayne was one of the 3 original pyrotechnologists for the 4th of July fireworks, presentation, and he was actually honored because he did this for 35 years, which is pretty amazing. Wayne's community involvement, including coaching Little League, serving on as a board member of the First Congregational Church of Sonoma, performed duties as a commissioner on the City of Sonoma's Public Utilities Commission, and served as a city representative on the Sonoma Mosquito Abatement District Board. And he was also, Wayne also developed the Screen Machine franchise, which is something that's very popular here. Wayne's Screen Machine he served Sonoma Valley for 25 years. And just a little note, at the age of 13, he opened up his own fix-it shop, which I think is amazing. Wayne was predeceased by his wife, his high school sweetheart, Anne, and he is survived by his sister, Carol Pinto, his 4 children, Wayne Jr., Carol, his wife, Lynn Ross Michael, husband, Lori Green, Bo, husband, Brian Luann Carlamagno. Wayne is cherished by his 12 grandchildren. I just wanted to let you know that our Wayne Wyrick, of course, Development Services Director and Building Officer, is here this evening. And if I'm indulged, could I ask Wayne and your children to come up, please, and you can introduce them for me. Thank you.
My husband at the window.
Thank you. This was unexpected. This is my son, Matt Wyrick. The rest of the family couldn't be here tonight. My sister Lynn is in the audience as well. But thank you very much.
You're
very
welcome.
much appreciate the dedication.
You're welcome. Wonderful, wonderful part. This is what makes Sonoma great, our people. Thank you.
And, oh.
I forgot my working.
And my condolences to you, Wayne, and your family. Are there any other dedications? No? Okay, we can move on to presentations.
Where is the presentation?
Oh, okay.
So our,
I'm sorry.
Okay. Lee, do you want to come up? Okay. And is this on? Yeah, great. Tonight I'm pleased to make a dedication proclamation which will be received by Lee Morgan Brown for the Mentoring Alliance. And I think everyone in town is familiar with the great work the Mentoring Alliance does. And I'm not going to read all the words of the proclamation, but just to know that it's in its 30th year or third decade of existence, and that there's so many children whose lives have been touched by the Mentoring Alliance, and so many adults who've had the pleasure and fulfillment of giving back to their community by helping a child achieve everything they can achieve through attending activities and caring about them and paying attention to them. And it's a labor of love for all who are involved, but especially for the director. And so I would like to present you with this proclamation and give you an opportunity to
get together.
to address the council, if you like.
Love to. Always happy to talk about mentoring. So thank all of you on the council and everyone here, community of Sonoma, and our board chair, David Parr, is here with me. This is our third decade, and what makes it special is now we're seeing our mentees start to come back and become mentors, which is very powerful. And always our goal is to empower and mentor our youth so that they can succeed in life and be all that they can be. It's a privilege to work with the adults who step up to become mentors. And for any of you who can think in their life of you, and you can bring to mind who it was that really stood for you and made that difference, if you can come into the space of that, then you might consider standing by a youth in our valley. And certainly everyone in this room and everyone in our organization This work happens because everyone works together as a team, and we're a unique town. We've mentored 1,900 youth in over 20 years, and it is a privilege to stand here today and receive these words on behalf of all those kids and on behalf of all the adults and all the people in the community that help us in different ways as community supporters. And it's a privilege. Thank you all.
Thank you for being here. Mr. Brown?
I've been a mentor for a very long time, and it's as good for the adults as it is for the children, and it's a wonderful group.
Thank you. And now on to item 3.2, which is a presentation by the Sonoma Valley Hospital regarding their current initiatives, and Kelly Mather, the president and CEO, if you want to come forward.
Great. Thank you. Again, Kelly Mather at Sonoma Valley Hospital. I'm happy to come talk about a couple positive things that have been happening at the hospital and how optimistic we are about 2019 and beyond. Is this going to work? Alrighty. So I want to talk about the UCSF affiliation, a little bit more about reinventing the hospital and who we are today, and the Outpatient Diagnostic Center. So the UCSF affiliations happened in February of this year, and we are very excited. There are now 18 hospitals in this network. So at one time there was mostly Kaiser and Sutter, and then everybody else was doing their own thing, but now together we are coming one together and competing now with Kaiser, which is something that's been long overdue. So the vision for 2020 for UCSF was to pull these hospitals around the Bay Area, now in 10 counties together, and we are one of them. We are a 4-star hospital, and they are also a 4-star hospital. All of us aim to be 5-star hospitals, but we met all the quality expectations that they had. There were no changes that we had to make, so it was an easy affiliation and one that we're excited about. Again, I mentioned the growing network, and we are part of it. We're also a health plan. A little bit about the shift that's happened. We're down to a census of 10, sometimes 11 patients in the hospital. That does not include the skilled nursing facility. So we are a very small inpatient hospital. We've accepted that. That is the case. Many people don't qualify now to be admitted, or they just don't want to be admitted. They'd rather go home. So 75% of our services are outpatient, and of course our number one goal is always to be the emergency, or always to give emergency services to our community. One thing we had to do last year as all of the changes started facing us, and we really had to look at our services in our 10 service lines and figure out what we needed to keep. And I think we've kept the right things. So our commitment, number one, is always emergency services, followed again by all that outpatient work. And now with UCSF, we will be the designated diagnostic center for the North Bay. So people will be able to come to our hospital, get their pre-workup, get those kind of things done, and not have to drive to the city. So again, more reasons to be optimistic about our future. I already mentioned a little bit about the outpatient services, but I also wanted to mention how high our market share is for outpatient services. So for radiology, for lab, for physical therapy, we're at 80% or above. So people who can use us, use us. And it's important to know that, because I think some people don't realize how often we are the access point for most of our community members. We do 10,000 visits in emergency and 170,000 outpatient visits a year. Okay, good news. We've been working on an outpatient diagnostic center for about 2 years. This is a follow-up to the emergency department. So again, thank goodness everyone came together and we all decided we should stay at the site we are in. We built the emergency and surgery services. We did that for $46 million. The community gave us a GEO bond of $35 million, and we raised $11 million. But we still had a service in imaging that needed to be upgraded. The building that imaging is in was built in 1972. It was before a lot of imaging services were even invented. So now we're going back and we're taking the old emergency department and the old surgery department and backfilling to create an outpatient diagnostic center. This will include 128 slice CT. We'll have one of the best CAT scans in the North Bay, and also a 3 Tesla MRI, which works with a lot of the patients who need diagnosis. We'll be one of the few to have that in the entire Bay Area. Right now, there's a 6-week wait for that at UCSF, and we're going to have that in our community. So we've been working on this, again, for about 18 months, and I just wanted to share this will be the new imaging waiting room, and this will be the new CT. And we have the MRI. We have not done the drawings yet for it, but that's project 2. And together, the MRI benefits, I don't really need to get into that too much, except to say that if someone has prostate cancer, they have to go to the 3 Tesla MRI to get that diagnosed. And some often wait for at least 6 weeks, sometimes even longer, to get these tests, and they'll be able to get it right away now. So the cost for this center is $20 million, and we've raised $15 million at this point. So we're very optimistic that we'll be able to get the last 5 and get this going. And again, we're the largest employer in the city, and we have a $100 million economic impact on this community. I think we're very important, and the community and the donors have also said they agree, and they've given us the money so far. Any questions?
I guess the only question would be, is there a role that you envision the city playing in supporting this work?
Actually, just allowing us to talk about what's happening at the hospital in a positive way, I think, is important. Sometimes we only hear about what's not working, and maybe we should talk a little bit more about what is working. The fact that we've come so far in quality is important, and people really don't know that until they've accessed our services. And another thing that, just to share, is that we have a Rate My Hospital system. So if you come to the hospital, you get a text message, and you get to give us your feedback right away. And we know in a small community, if someone's not happy, they're going to share. So we go immediately and try to address any concerns. And the total score on Rate My Hospital is out of 5, and we're at 4.8 out of 5. So I would like you to share those positive things.
Great. Thank you for coming. Any other questions?
I just want a comment. I went out to coffee this morning with Peter Hohorst. He explained to me about UCSF, and Kaiser, of course, has a senior advantage program, and I believe UCSF is in that direction.
Right.
And we have a lot of people here in this area who are part of the medical system for UCSF. So this is a no-brainer. I'm pretty excited.
Yes.
Excited about this. And then people don't have to, it used to be fun going down there into the city. That's over with.
Right.
So to stay here and have diagnostic tools is wonderful for the people here in Sonoma and the entire valley. So I'm very excited for
And we're
you
not
all.
just going to have the diagnostics, we're going to have some of their physicians here as well, so they won't have to drive for those appointments. A lot of their physicians are moving to Sonoma. I just talked to another one today. So when they live here, they want to work here, which is wonderful.
Great. Thank you so much for coming. Next item 4, is the consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar for both the City Council and the successor agency are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by a single motion for each agency. So we're actually going to need 2 motions to approve the consent calendar, one for the City Council and one for the successor agency. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. At this time, the council can decide to change the order of the agenda. There's 2 separate motions required for the 2 consent calendar sections. Any council comments? Oh, okay. Public comment? Does anyone from the public want to comment on the consent calendars? Seeing no public comment, can I get some motions?
I would like to make a motion to approve the items on the regular consent calendar.
Second.
Is that good enough for the purposes of having 2 separate motions?
Well, it would be the city.
The city consent calendar.
Perfect. City council consent calendar, yes.
Roll call.
Councilmember Henley?
Aye.
Councilmember Cook?
Aye on 2-3 and 2-10. I didn't attend the 12-17 meeting.
Vice Mayor Harvey?
Yes.
Councilmember Agramonte.
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
And on the second consent calendar, items 5.1 and 5.2.
Mayor, just one moment, sorry.
Sorry. So I'm sorry, Vice Mayor Harvey, with regard to the minutes for the first two meetings, those would be abstentions given that you weren't actually here for those two meetings?
I think the rules are that if the person reads the minutes or watches the meeting, that they can vote on the minutes if they feel comfortable doing that, correct?
That would be true if you're actually a member of the body when the action takes place. I agree with what you just said, but I think there's a little technicality with not having been a member of the body. So if you just...
So I abstain from the meeting minutes for 12:3 and 12:10.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there a motion on items 5.1 and 5.2?
I move to approve items 5.1 and 5.2 on the consent calendar.
Second.
Roll call.
Vice Chairman Harvey.
Yes.
Board Member Agramonte.
Aye.
I'm sorry, I totally did that out of order. I was trying to get the titles right. Sorry about that. Let me start that over. Board Member Henley.
Aye.
Board Member Cook.
Aye.
Vice Chair Harvey.
Yes.
Board Member Agramonte.
Aye.
And Chair Harrington.
Oh, I guess so. Oh, because we have different titles. Yeah. Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries
Because
unanimously.
this is the successor agency, not the city council. Okay, thank you. Okay, now moving on to the regular city council calendar. Item 7.1 is a discussion, consideration, and possible action selecting the 2019 City of Sonoma Alcalde. And I'm going to turn it over to the city manager.
Okay. Mayor Harrington, council members of the community. So as we are well aware, we have a fabulous tradition in town of having a special alcalde that recognizes folks that have given kind of above and beyond. And that says a lot in our town because there's so much generosity and volunteer work. And so these are folks that have participated in a broad spectrum of voluntary community service. They may have served in a leadership role in at least one nonprofit, spearheaded different community serving projects without compensation, that kind of behind the scenes good deeds folks. And they're not these people are not those that go out and say, give me credit. So in terms of the way the process works is we have an open nomination period. Those nominations are turned in and received, and then there's a nominating committee made up of the mayor, myself, and this time there were 4 members of the alcalde, past alcaldes, who provided a recommendation to Mayor Harrington, and then it is Mayor Harrington's opportunity to make a recommendation and make an announcement, and then the council ratifies that. And so with that, I'll turn it to Mayor Harrington to talk about the 2019 alcalde.
Well, I guess first I'd like to just say that the past alcaldes were so helpful in this process and incredibly thoughtful, and I really appreciate all of their efforts to make this program what it is. And I mean, just their amount of work on this has been tremendous. And the second thing I would say is that I think this is the most nominations we have ever received, and there were just so many incredible wonderful people in our community that we got to learn about through the letters of recommendation, that it was a really difficult decision about who to pick, because I basically wanted to pick everybody who had been nominated, but that's not possible. And so I did settle on one alcaldesa, and that is Karen Collins. And Karen is a County and Regional Parks Commissioner. She served as the Community Advisory Board for the Carolyn J. Stone Center for Women's Health and Wellness at Sonoma Valley Hospital. She's twice co-chaired the Celebration of Women event for the hospital. Karen, along with Maggie Haywood, co-founded the Sonoma Overlook Trail, and the idea from concept to implementation. I thought that Karen is a really great alcaldesa this year because of all the new work that's been done on the Overlook Trail and how beautiful the trail looks right now. And also thank you, Fred, for your work as well. She's the director. She's a director of the board of Jack London State Park and instrumental in bringing that organization forward. She's been a board member of the Sonoma Ecology Center. She served on the CSEC. She's formerly a board member of the Sonoma Valley Fund and is currently an advisory member. And I think she's just really, she organizes a Sunday bike ride with a lot of people who want to ride together. I mean, there's sort of many things that Karen does to bring people together and also to really champion our environment and our community. So I'm proud to have her be our alcaldesa this year, and I will call her and find out if she agrees to be our alcaldesa now, I guess.
Actually, before we do that, Mayor Harrington, we'll go to public comment, then come back, have the council take a vote to ratify, and then we'll take a 5-minute break while you have an opportunity to call her.
All right. I'll take it out to the public if there's any public comments. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council for comments or a vote. Go ahead.
I'm excited about your choice, and I am happy to support it tonight. And I would like to make a motion to ratify the selection of Karen Collins as our 2019 alcaldesa.
Second.
A roll call.
Councilmember Henley,
Aye.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Councilmember Agramonte. Aye. Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank
And-
you. Motion carries unanimously.
And with that, we'll take a 5-minute break and I'll call Karen and let her know. Thank you. Are we ready?
Oh, we're doing this thing right now.
Okay. Well, I think we'll bring the meeting back to order. And Ms. Collins has accepted her appointment as alcaldessa. She's very excited, so that's nice. I think it might be a timely, we didn't say this, but basically for next year, anybody who'd like to nominate somebody to serve as our alcalde can turn in letters during the nominating period to the city manager and describe the person and who they are and why they think that they should get to be our alcalde or alcaldessa for that year. So if you think of somebody for the coming year that you has done a wonderful job and deserves to be recognized, you should submit a letter to Kathy Capriola, and perhaps it will be our next alcalde. Thank you. And now on to item 7.2. Consideration, discussion, and possible action to make appointments of the City of Sonoma Community Services and Environment Commission, the Design Review and Historical Preservation Commission, Cultural and Fine Arts Commission, Planning Commission, and Traffic Safety Committee using the process approved in the council commission appointment policy, and to provide staff with any further direction regarding appointments. And I'll have the city manager and the city clerk discuss this item and talk about the process we're going to use.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Harrington, members of the council. So, council is aware in the last, I guess, year, 18 months, we changed and updated some of the policies of how we do this. So, I'm going to have the clerk put up the first one so I can kind of talk this through. Okay, so we will take each commission individually, okay, and we'll go through each one separately. And if part of the process that council approved in the policy before is we actually did a random draw a year ago for each of the commissions. So there was an order that we would go. And so that order will be different for each of the commissions, okay? And you will be, part of the process now is where we have 7-member commissions. Each council member makes an individual commission appointment. There are, I think, 1 or 2 where there's only 5. And when there's 7, you each make an individual appointment, and then there's 2 at-large and 1 alternate. And for the at-large and the alternate, you vote together, and we'll go through that. So the way this would work on the first one, so for example, Planning Commission, since Mayor Harrington and Councilmember Cook, their appointees continue because they were made when they were a year ago and they were not up for re-election. But here with now Vice Mayor Harvey being appointed and Councilmember Agramonte and Councilmember Hundley, you have an opportunity for those prior council members to retain your prior appointee and or to make a change. And again, the process is you have to look at someone who went through and put in an application. So what we'll do first is we will, on this one, I'm just going to walk through the full process so you see it, okay? So Planning Commission, again, you see Harrington is blocked out in that top. These are everyone who applied because Mayor Harrington will not be making an appointee. She's already made her appointee. Then we'll go to Vice Mayor Harvey, and Vice Mayor Harvey will tell us who his appointee is for Planning Commission. That person then gets crossed off the list down below because obviously they're not eligible for at-large and not eligible for the alternate. We'll then go to Councilmember Hundley for her appointee. We'll then go to Councilmember Agramonte for your appointee. So then there will be 3 names that will be taken off the list, crossed off down below, and then we will be going back to the at-large. And we will go forward first, and I will ask Mayor Harrington who are your 2 recommendations for at-large. And the at-large can be chosen from that middle group. Again, all the names are there, but we will cross off anyone who's been selected. They can also be selected from the group at the bottom. The 2 at the bottom are folks that live in the valley, do not live in the city limits. And the reason we broke it this way is because the alternate has to be someone who lives in the city limits because they're representing either an at-large person if they're stepping in and or representing a resident that one of you may have appointed. So that's the way the kind of policy is stated at this point. Any questions on that process?
I guess my only question is, it seems like it would work better to go 1 by 1 so that you would say 1 person for the at-large and then get that person selected, cross that name off, and then do your second round of at-large. Because if you name 2 people, it just feels like it'll be too confusing. That would be my I think you said say all of your picks at once.
We
but
said the two at large. I mean, we can do it we can do it either way.
I
This
think
is
it would be
really a pleasure
better-
of the council.
I think it would be better to do it one by one. Is that okay?
Let's try it. Let's try it that way, and then we can. Okay. All right. So with that, we're going to start with Vice Mayor Harvey, and I'm going to ask you for your direct appointee for Planning Commission.
So my direct appointee for Planning Commission will be Steve Barbos.
Okay. So then Mr. Barbos will come off the list down below since he is no longer eligible for an at-large or alternate. I'll now move to Councilmember Hunley.
And I would like to appoint James Bohar.
Okay, and Mr. Bohar will come off down below. Councilmember Agramonte?
Robert Felder.
Okay, and Mr. Felder is appointed by Councilmember Agramonte, and so then we'll now, sorry about that. Takes a little bit of time for that to get in my system. All right, so now we have, we'll now go and look at the at-large, and I will ask Mayor Harrington for your number one choice for at-large.
My first pick is Larry Barnett.
Okay. Vice Mayor Harvey?
Yes.
Who is your appointee? No, who's your number one for the at-large?
Larry Barnett is also my number one for the at-large.
Councilmember Hunley?
I will also pick Larry Barnett.
Councilmember Agramonte?
Therese Nugent.
And Councilmember Cook?
Therese Nugent.
Okay, so based on majority, Larry Barnett is chosen for an at-large position. We'll now go to the second at-large position, and we'll start with Mayor Harrington.
And this is, it could be in the city limits or without.
Correct.
Okay.
Could be, so it's both those two bottom groupings, correct?
Okay, so my second choice is Sheila O'Neill.
Okay. Vice Mayor Harvey?
My second choice would also be Sheila O'Neill.
Councilmember Hunley?
I will also pick Sheila O'Neill.
Mayor Agramonte?
Can I wanted to repeat with Therese Nugent.
You can. And Councilmember Cook?
Therese Nugent.
Okay. So Sheila O'Neill is appointed to the at-large position, living in the Valley. We'll now go to the alternate position, and I'll start again with Mayor Harrington.
I will select current planning commissioner Bob McDonald.
Moving to Vice Mayor Harvey.
I would also select Robert McDonald.
And moving to next, Councilmember Henley.
I will pick Bob McDonald.
Councilmember Agramonte.
Therese Nugent.
And Councilmember Cook.
Teresa Nugent.
And Bob McDonald is selected as an alternate for Planning Commission. Does that process work for folks?
Yeah.
Keep the Thasian process? Okay. We'll be next moving to the CSCC. And again, we'll start with Councilmember Hunley.
For my direct appointment, I'd like to pick Kimberly Blattner.
Okay. Vice Mayor Harvey.
My direct appointment will be David Morrell.
And Councilmember Agramonte.
Oh, mine was Jack Wagner.
Okay. So now we have moving to the at-large, and I'll start with Mayor Harrington. And there are two options for folks to live in the city and one for the valley. And we'll start with your number one at-large.
I guess my question for this one is, since we have two people that have applied and one at large, can we just vote to accept the current applicants as in those roles?
You need to determine who the alternate is going to be. Sorry, go ahead.
The only problem is that with that is you have actually three individuals that are left. You have one that's eligible for the alternate position, or two that are eligible for the alternate position. Fred Alabak, unfortunately, would not be eligible for the alternate position. So if you did, you would have to pick. It would probably be easier to do the alternate first, or you could choose to leave that. You could choose to leave something vacant if you liked, but
And who is the current alternate?
to the CSCC, they did not reapply.
Oh, okay.
It was just.
Okay,
Jeff
so,
I think if we could,
well, I would just suggest that Thomas Edwards be the alternate, that Sandy, I don't know, I'm going to say her name wrong. Funky be an at-large, and that Fred Alabak be an at-large. That's my suggestion. I don't know if people have other suggestions, but if that's all right, then we could just vote on that.
That makes sense to me. Fred's the current chair of the commission, and Sandy Funky is on commission right now, so that makes sense.
so I think what we need to do, if we're going to try to shortcut it, do it this way, make a motion, and then hear a second and see, we need to do a roll call vote on that proposal versus voting on them individually.
Okay, I'll make a motion that Thomas Edwards be the alternate, and that Sandy Funky and Fred Alabak be appointed for at-large, with Fred being the outside city limits.
I'll second that.
Councilmember Henley,
Aye.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Councilmember Agramonte, Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving to the Cultural and Fine Arts Commission. So we'll start with Vice Mayor Harvey.
Steve Hagstrom will be my appointment.
Councilmember Hunley.
I'd like to pick Lauren Kirshner.
Councilmember Agramonte.
Veronica Napoles.
Okay. And moving now to at-large, I'm starting with Councilmember Cook. So who's your number one at-large appointee recommendation?
Two of mine got taken, so I will go ahead and do Constance Shalene.
Okay. Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yeah, I trust David. That sounds good. Constance Shalene.
Mayor Harrington.
Sounds good to me. I'll vote the same.
Councilmember Hunley.
I'd like to pick Ryan Small.
And Councilmember Agramonte.
Deborah Self.
So Constance Shalin with 3 votes becomes the one at large. And then we've got one more at large. So we'll start again with Councilmember Cook.
Deborah Self.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Ryan Small.
Mayor Harrington.
Ryan Small.
Councilmember Hunley.
Ryan Small.
Mayor Agramonte.
Ryan Small.
So Ryan Small becomes the other at-large appointee, and then moving to the alternate. And Sue Martin is not eligible for this position, and so I'm going back to Councilmember Cook.
Troy Knox.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
And Deborah Self.
Mayor Harrington.
Deborah Self.
Councilmember Hunley.
Marie Edlin.
And Mayor Agramonte.
Okie dokie. Mayor.
Sorry.
Deborah Self.
Deborah Self. I apologize. So we move, Deborah Self becomes the alternate. All right. And then moving next to Design Review Historic Preservation Commission, making good progress. Thank you, everyone. Moving first, we'll start with council member, just one clarification, the city clerk, we have how many spaces here? Still looking for 2 alternates and 1 at large? No, it's just, no, there's not 2 at large, they're just looking for an alternate, is that right? Okay. So we'll start with council member Hunley, your direct appointee.
Michaela Randolph.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Christopher Johnson.
Mayor Agramonte, sorry, council member Agramonte.
Charles Cormany.
Okay, now we're looking for 1 at large. And we'll start with council member Cook.
Kelly Amar.
Okay. You could always choose to go back out and not appointee, not appoint.
I'll make a motion to appoint Kelly Amar.
Okay.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Henley.
Aye.
Councilmember Cook.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yes.
Councilmember Agramonte.
Yes.
Mayor Harrington.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Correct. This is a 5-member commission with 1 alternate.
Right, we don't have an
So it's
alternate.
not an at-large, it's the, I'm just clarifying that it's the alternate.
No, we have 1 at
No.
large. No, 1 doesn't have to be.
We don't have an alternate.
You actually, you have, because there's 5 members of this board, you have 5 that you directly appoint.
Oh.
And then 1 is an alternate.
Oh, okay.
But 1 individual does not have to be, 1 of your direct appointments does not necessarily have to be a Valley member, because it's.
So I think I misspoke earlier. So this really, that maybe we should clarify, and correct me if I'm wrong, city clerk. So the appointee here, because you need 1, they just need 1 alternate, the appointee is for the alternate?
Yes.
Why does the document say 1 at-large position, comma, and alternate?
Because 1 of your direct, it's kind of a weird thing, I guess, because when I probably should have just wrote directly appointed, 1 could be a Valley member. Because it's kind of a weird, because you only have 5 and the traffic safety is the same way. 1 of your appointments could have been a at-large, and I think it's one of those clarifications to make sure we word it correctly, so.
Maybe at-large we should use a different word. Because at-large to me sounds like the whole council is voting on it.
That's where my head was as well, so sorry about that.
I think
We'll
the
have
word
to-
you're looking for is Valley elector or Valley voter as opposed to city voter.
Yeah.
We can clarify that when we bring the policy back.
Great, thank you.
Sorry about that confusion. Okay, so to point of clarification, Kelly Amar is appointed as the alternate.
Correct.
Okay. All right, moving back to then the traffic safety last, and we'll start with Councilmember Agramonte for direct appointee for traffic safety.
Yvonne Bowers.
And moving to Vice Mayor Harvey.
Andrew Armando Zimmerman.
Councilmember Hunley.
New kids stealing commissioners. I have already spoken to my commissioner. Well, in that regard, I would like to pick Matthew Wyrick.
All right. So those are the direct appointees, and now we are looking for Councilmember Harrington and Cooks already have their appointees, so we're looking for 1 alternate, which needs to come from that middle group. So we'll start with Councilmember Agramonte.
So I can't pick Nancy Conley.
You can.
Okay, well, that's what I'm doing.
Mayor Harrington.
Also Nancy Parmalee.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
I'll take Nancy Parmalee.
Councilmember Hunley.
Nancy Parmalee.
Councilmember Cook.
Nancy Parmalee.
All right, so Nancy becomes the alternate. And that is the end of the commission appointment process. There are a few tweaks, kind of minor edits. At some point, staff will bring back to the commission, just the commission policy, some minor edits, but we'll talk about that at another time. Any other comments or questions council has on this one?
I do. I just, I want to make sure that we communicate with the people that were appointed and were also not appointed, and to thank them for applying. And so, that will go out tomorrow. Okay.
Yeah, we'll do that communication. And then anyone who chose not to reapply or it was the end of their term, those folks we invite back to the next meeting with certificates of appreciation.
Great. Perfect. Thank you. Shockingly unpainful.
Getting it down.
I think we're on to item 7.3, discussion, consideration, and possible direction on regulations on wine tasting facilities in the city, including restrictions for the Plaza Retail Overlay District. And now I'll turn it over to the city manager for a report.
Mayor Harrington, Council, if you recall back in December, we were in front of you talking about looking at some broad policy direction. At that point, Council had some questions. So we've done some research on that and have some information is in the staff report. And I'd like to turn it over to our planning director, David Storr, to run you through a brief PowerPoint. And Council has seen this information really for members of the public. There's no new information really here, and then we'll have a conversation and start to move through this.
Kathy, would you have the clicker? I understand there's some buttons here that I don't hit.
Yes. Just that one. That's the one you want to hit. Okay. Yes.
7.3.
7.3. Thank you, Kathy. David Storr, Planning Community Services Director, Mayor Harrington, and council members. As Kathy pointed out, you last heard this item on the 3rd of December of last year, at which point we were requested to come back with some discussion regarding permitting processes and the concept of licensing. As a cheat sheet, for example, you can actually just turn to Exhibit A in the staff report, and that will get you to my end point. But along the way, for the benefit of the public, I'd like to just kind of go through some high points of the staff report. The first slide that I have here tonight is just talking about the timing of things that need to occur. Should the council wish to have an ordinance, it would need to be in place by May the 1st of this year, which when you work back a little bit later on, we'll have to talk a little bit about the timing of when that item goes to the Planning Commission and also for your first and your second reading, and then a 30-day period in which to have the ordinance take effect. So a brief recap, on the permitting process here in the city. But before I do that, as you see the slide here, there are 3 types of permits or licenses, if you will, with respect to somebody who wishes to establish a wine tasting facility in the city. The first one would, no particular order that I'm aware of, but you would need to obtain an ABC license from the state of California, also a business license from the city, and also a land use permit regulating whereabouts you can go within the city. At present, there's a 4th permit, excuse me. One is a temporary use permit. That's really not germane to what we're talking about tonight. But you'll see those types of permits and the acronyms used throughout the staff report and in land use jargon. When it comes to a use permit within the city, we currently only have one district that allows for a wine tasting facility with an actual use permit, and that's been implemented since 2014 when the mixed use zoning district began to require a conditional use permit or a use permit to operate. So tonight we'll be talking a little bit about a process, while not talking about a license per se. We will be talking about some of the components that are taken from a licensing structure, if you will, and I'll get into that in a moment about where we're kind of recommending that the council go if that's what you want to do with respect to providing some land use or regulatory control. Obviously keeping the business license, obviously keeping the ABC license, but also providing a mechanism that we can have some of the controls that you were talking about at your prior meeting relative to how licensing could work, but by another name. So just for some information about ABC licenses, generally 5 categories of license, and there's almost 84 plus or minus types of licenses. And you may have heard of the O2s or the 41 types that are various types of wine operating permits that you can get, or licenses, excuse me, that you can get from the state. With respect to issues that have occurred within the community, In 2005, the city established the PROD, the Plaza Retail Overlay District. That was to deal with retail and office mix composition. So your action to have some kind of mechanism to deal with wine tasting is along that same kind of family of things to consider. Past issues relate to such things as diversity and size that you've discussed relative to the plaza and other areas within the city, the goals and the vision of the community, diversity and mix, lease rates, those kind of issues have come up with respect to even establishing a number or a limit, if you will. Control, trying to figure out a number, if a number is an appropriate mechanism to determine whether you choose to have a number within the PROD, within the Historic Overlay District, or throughout the city as a whole. As I mentioned earlier, the ABC controls the actual licensing of permits for wine tasting facilities. The city of Sonoma, it basically preempts the city of Sonoma from getting into that business, if you will. But the law, within the state of California, we do have land use control, and that is the component that you'll see in many jurisdictions throughout California when they want to regulate sensitive uses, if you will. In our particular zoning ordinance, we have three categories of types of uses. There's not permitted within a certain district. There's principally permitted within a district, meaning you don't go to the planning commission for a mother may I permit. It's just outright allowed. And then you get the conditional use permit or a use permit in our vernacular here in Sonoma, where you have to go to the planning commission to get that entitlement. And that entitlement will run with the land almost as if it were a principally permitted use. So in talking about choices for you this evening, you can actually go to page 9 of your staff report, where it will outline some of the options that are available to you as a council. But as I said earlier at the beginning of my presentation, page 16 is an exhibit that I'll go through in a few moments as I get through these few slides and outline the various topics for your consideration tonight. But when you're talking about creating a tasting room permit where we tie it to the land use, it would be another name for a special use permit or a conditional use permit. We would be calling it a tasting room permit, and that will be placed and inserted in our development code so that people can see where in the city that particular use can happen, similar to where you have with the mixed use zoning currently. So we can ensure that there's separation of uses with a TRP. Some of the things that relate to a licensing discussion that you had previously. We can talk about diversity, reduce impacts on parking, and also maintaining our character, which I think is an important thing when it comes to the plaza. If the plaza facing front facilities or businesses or the places where you want to regulate, or whether it's in the overlay district of the historic district. We can create an ordinance or a TRP process that will allow for consent of the property owners to operate at a particular location. Again, you would need to refine if it's citywide, historic district, overlay, or the PROD. And that authority can go to staff. In many ordinances, it can go to a staff like you may have heard of a zoning administrator before. Those usually occur in larger jurisdictions, larger populations, and even in counties where they have a need for a relief valve than having it go to the planning commission. These TRPs could even be designed to go to the city council directly, should that be the council's wish, based on sensitivity of the issues. As you can see from this slide right here, we do have a geographic outline for you to see. I think you can see the blue and then the lighter shade of blue around the plaza, where you can see the triangles with respect to the O2 permits. The O2 permits are the wine tasting permits, as opposed to the 41s, which is basically a bar type of permit that's issued by ABC. These have all been, with the exception of one in our community, all been principally permitted as uses where the city council has no jurisdiction, or not the city council, but the city has no ability to regulate their placement or a number that's advisable or wanted by the council. So getting into the geography, and I apologize for my scribbles here, but it's the only map that I could find that had all of the pieces together. You may notice that there's an absence in the legend of the yellow and the little pinkish color. Those are the National Registry districts. That's a good use of the my graphic here, but the PROD in the green shows you that prior slide that I just showed you with respect to the historic overlay zone, which is a much larger piece of geography, and it does go down south of Broadway, if you will. almost to the south end of town. So you can kind of get a sense for where the issue is and where the actual existing principally permitted wine tasting facilities are located. So under our current code, we have basically a process, and I'll try to talk about the colors here. So for example, if I had a wine tasting facility right now, I was principally permitted, and I'd be able to use that indefinitely. But should I then be exposed, if you will, to a new set of rules, I would then have to comply with those rules to a point. And that would, the point being, well, if I want to expand or change my business. But if I want to keep it exactly the same, a new set of rules, which would be the black bar there, I can continue my use indefinitely as I will be grandfathered in. The new provisions only kick in when I do something different or wish to go back to, let's say, the Planning Commission to expand that use or make some revisions to my permit. The only way that my permit would no longer to be in existence would be if I go out of business and that use at that location discontinues or ceases for a period of a year. That's our current zoning code. And so if there's a loss of my non-conforming status, if it doesn't continue indefinitely, I'd have to go to a hearing to have that reviewed by the Planning Commission in most cases. And I have no idea what happened to this one.
Fade to black.
I promise I hit the right button on this one. Oh.
There you go.
Okay, now a future code. Did it just go off because it was used too long? Okay.
It went dark.
It went dark. Okay, so in our future code, if the direction is such that we wanted to or decrease the time of nonconformity or abandonment, if you will, the new code would be the black bar. My wine tasting facility would be good, but we would then have an ability to shorten the time from a year that I'm out of business before I go on that process to lose my use. And we would then be able to kind of come up with either a period of whether it's 3 months or longer, depending on the speed that you desire to have that nonconformity be removed. Again, subject to a hearing. One other process to kick it into hyperdrive, if you will, if you really have that intent to get rid of those uses, such as mine that I was just talking about in the example, if you wanted to not wait for that year, you could actually put in a process of amortization. But again, these amortization periods tend to be a little bit longer than a year. You would also need to have some things to be factored when an amortization period is established. Ones that I've been privy to over the years has been nothing short of five years that I've seen. Many go as long as 30, 35 years and longer, depending on the rate that you wish to get rid of that public nuisance or that thing that you want to kind of restrict or remove. And again, when you consider an amortization rate or time period, if you will, things such as the cost of the land and the improvements, the investment, if you will, the time that the use has been in existence, all factor in with some other things that you see on the slide. So going back to the staff report and getting to the first comment that I made, you'll see that we've broken it down into 5 categories, if you will, with respect to the types of questions that are raised in the staff report, is going from who can apply, the type of process that you want to create for future uses, also talking about where you want to regulate them, a number or a concentration. Concentration would be not just the number, but placing them within the block facing the prod or citywide, if you will. And then finally, how do you treat existing tasting rooms? Do you want to shorten the abandonment process or time period, if you will? And do you want to institute an amortization rate along that way? And I've lost the last one. Okay. Should the council wish to direct an ordinance? Again, as I mentioned at the outset, there's a time thing that we need to be sensitive to, and that would require going to the Planning Commission at least by February 21st in order for the council to have a couple of hearings and at least to conclude its process so that a second reading occurs before April the 1st, because we do have that 30-day provision where the ordinance takes in effect. I don't know if it's called a cooling off period or what the terminology is used these days, but we can also establish, if there's a need, special meetings of the commission and the council in order to meet those dates. But these are just some that I've tentatively put there for your consideration. This concludes staff's report.
Hey, I have a question. Can you go back to page 10?
I don't know.
Report of the slides. Of the slides, or item 10 of the
Is
slides.
this simply going back?
One more. There. Can you just go over amortization again for me?
Sure. So again, if you have an existing use that's out there and a new rule is put into place that changes the way that you want to prospectively feature, deal with these wine tasting facilities, you would build into your ordinance an amortization process that would establish a period of time from which that business would have to be compliant with the new set of rules, and it would lose its non-conforming status.
So in this example, we have a wine tasting room, it's there, and the new rule says, what is an example of a new rule that they'd have to come into compliance with?
It may be locational. That'll be the first thing that
Not like, what is the actual rule? When you say locational, let's say we say there can only be two facing the plaza.
Right, for example, so if you've got one that's facing, if you specify a certain number, then you would then require them to relocate, if you will. Would that be fair to say?
Generally speaking, an amortization period would say, here are your new rules and regulations, the plethora of them. A business that could license itself, meaning could meet the requirements of the license, it wasn't in excess of the number you established or in excess of the block face limitations, could, for lack of a better word, legalize itself, comply with the new permitting scheme, and the new permitting scheme then being in effect for them would then possess a license under the new, or a permit under the new permitting scheme. Those who did not, by the end of the amortization period, whatever time you set that in place, would be forced out of business, subject to a notice and a hearing, which would address whether or not they had been able to recoup their investment, if you will. Now, we've learned, as we've done a boatload of investigation into these circumstances, one of the things that we have learned by talking to the real estate agents that have been leasing up these spaces is that the tenant improvements in these spaces are largely completed, in fact, almost exclusively completed by the tenant, not the landlord, which goes into that factor of what is it you're trying to recoup. Because remember, the space is still available for other retail uses as a principally permitted use. It just would not be available after the end of the amortization period for a wine tasting facility unless it could otherwise meet the permitting requirements.
So if we limited, let's say we limited it to 25 wine tasting rooms total in that area, and there's 36 or whatever there are you saying that at some period of time those ones could be forced out of business?
Under a strict amortization period, that is correct. You have some options available to you under amortization periods, however, that could address the number declining over time, meaning you could set the number at, let me make it more simple. You could reserve a number of permits for existing businesses that exceeded your cap.
Right.
So if you capped out at 20, you could say, for a year, we'll issue in excess of 20 if you're an existing business, so that those could come in and legalize themselves
Right.
without the cap being applicable to them, and then back down over time as each one of them or others went out of business until you reached the number 20. Does that make sense?
That part makes sense. I guess I just don't understand about, so I invest $300,000 into making my rental space into a wine tasting facility, and at the end of 5 years, let's say I am no longer conforming because I can't get a permit and there's only going to be 20, then there's a hearing to see if I've recouped the investment I made, or what's the hearing on
That is correct.
And then what if I have not?
If you have not, then we would extend that time period for an additional period of time until such time as you could have recouped your investment. So there's several cases out there.
It's like
Challenging amortization periods based on non-recoup of an investment, and they vary. They're all over the board.
So it's like to avoid a taking.
Correct, absolutely correct.
All right. That's all my questions. Does anyone else have questions? Councilmember Hundley?
So I'm still trying to wrap my head around this tasting room permit, because our dream that we were hoping that we could do was that it would be a business specific sort of permit or license they could carry with them, but that concept, because of preemption, doesn't sound like it's available. So this tasting room permit being presented, is it because it's it has to be renewed, and that is how, like, what is the effect of, what's the advantage of this new permit proposition?
Well, right now you have, as I mentioned earlier, you have a zoning code that currently has a use permit only allowed within the mixed-use zone. So what you could do is expand the use permit process into your commercial zones, the commercial zone. So you got two commercial zones, mixed use and commercial. Right now, people can go principally permitted into the commercial zone. Should the council wish to create a process, you then make it broader to require a use permit in the commercial zone where you currently don't have one. That would be the principal benefit of doing it.
So then going from a traditional use permit to the annually renewed tasting room permit, can you explain to me again the difference in advantages
Yeah, I'll
of
give it a
having
shot. And
a
then,
new kind of permit creature?
yeah, so conditional use permits or a use permit like the one that we have in a mixed use zone. We currently have only one wine tasting facility in the mixed use zone, but they predated the ordinance that required it. So in the case of a use permit, those run with the land. So right now, we could create a new use permit, if you will, or a tasting room permit that can have a specified period of time attached to it, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, but it's not in perpetuity.
And so the only way, because we were trying to get around the whole running with the land thing, but I guess inherent in land use is the fact that it attaches to the land and not the people. But so then the only difference is it would just be a time limit, just rather than going on forever. And so then the other question I had, so if we created, if we decided that a use permit was required, say, for example, in the downtown planning district, and everybody existing that does not have a use permit because they were principally permitted, so there's suddenly a non-conforming use. And so then, what's the step between that and the day when everybody that exists has already gone through the system and has that? So I think the suggestion was with the sort of, if there was this new permit situation, it would somehow be deciding like who existing gets one, or can you just keep everybody non-conforming and only as they
Go through attrition.
well, I mean, in my perfect world, I'm thinking, so there'll be, we have 31 now, reduce the number to 28, just to have a little bit of attrition and kind of keep things stable while we figure out our general plan. But as far as, because non-conforming uses, you're limited in what you can do with your property. You can't expand, you can't do major changes. Whereas if they were to, would it be when they wanted to, say, remodel their facility and there was a spot open, and that's when they'd sort of come into the light and be able to apply for a use permit if there was a spot available? Sorry if that didn't make any sense.
I think part of the idea with the shortening of the permit time applicable here. Oh, it's because that one's maybe. I think part of the idea with regard to shortening the permit time to 1 year as opposed to indefinitely, or a time period, and the concept of an annual administrative renewal process is to try to make it easy for somebody holding a permit to keep extending it, and a little harder for someone who's non-conforming to keep going. Now, again, it's not a perfect world. It's just trying to make it incentivize the coming in for a permit. And there are a few ways to do that. One is if, in fact, you're shortening the period of time from 1 year to, say, 6 months or 3 months, where it could sit vacant and still retain its legal non-conforming status. You're a little bit incentivizing them coming in for a permit as people move, because tenant A, It's easiest with an example. So tenant A is in a space currently and is a legal non-conforming use on the date of the adoption of the ordinance. That tenant either goes out of business or moves out, moves to new space, wants to expand somewhere else. They can't expand where they are, so they need to expand somewhere else. Now this business is vacant. It still has its legal non-conforming status, but if you shorten the time period of the legal non-conforming status, the idea is that someone would have to come in really quick into that space, a new operator, or that non-conforming status is lost, and that one then goes by attrition out of business. Now, when I say that one, there's no business going out of business. It's just no longer attached to that property, that vacant property. It also reduces the amount of time that a property owner would be willing to hold out vacant space as vacant, waiting for a new wine tasting facility. They might rent then instead to a different type of retail use, because the longer they hold vacant, the more at risk they are.
Yeah, abandonment was what I was going to ask about next. So, say we shrink the abandonment period to 2 months, and so under that, as long as it went from tasting room and within 60 days another tasting room was up and running, then everything's fine. And the new person couldn't do any substantial renovations because that would trigger what, like is it like a building permit?
They could do tenant improvements, and when I say tenant improvements, they couldn't expand the space, they couldn't expand seating, number of tables, those types of things, and we'd build in to the ordinance those provisions to be specific about them. But if they wanted to paint the walls and change the decoration, that's not an expansion of a non-conforming use, that's more like maintenance.
And my last question for the moment. So, setting aside this annual renewed permit and just thinking of traditional use permits that could be abandoned very quickly, considering how many tasting rooms we have now, how would a number be set? So say if the current number is 31, the target number is 28, how does that work? How do we know that when we get down to 27 and therefore have a spot available? And is it just counting everything that we have currently and then keeping track of it that way?
It's not just counting them, it's actually publishing a list of them. So you determine what your non-conforming uses are today, and you essentially publish what they are, where they are, how big they are, because then that's your benchmark, that's your demarcation line. And then yes, as each one goes out of business, you can do it one of several ways, but one of them, the most restrictive, would be if there's 31 today and your number's 26, nobody can get a permit, right? Because you're already over your number. And until you're down below that number, no permits would be issued. That would be the most restrictive approach to that. Or you say it's first come, first serve. If you're in town today and you are existing non-conforming, you have no permit, you are there as a principally permitted use, we're going to issue 26 permits, but we're only going to issue 26 permits. Better be the first one in the door so you're assured of getting one. Another way to incentivize coming to get the permits. Some will do it. Some, the property owner will say, I want to ride on my non-conforming status until it expires. Again, you'll get some that will come in, some that won't under that methodology. You could reserve permits, as we talked about a little bit earlier, for above your number for the existing businesses, so you can incentivize them to all come in and say, all right, for 1 year, existing businesses can come in and get one even if they're over the 26.
But I don't understand the advantage of permitting existing uses. What's the advantage? It's going to be there either way.
Well, there's two potential advantages. One, you mean to the property owner or the tenant? What's the advantage for them or to us?
So the tasting room permit would only be for the business owner and not for the landowner?
It would be for both. So at that point, you would bring the landowner the location into conformance with the ordinance and the rules of the ordinance would apply to that location. So that's the advantage to the city. The advantage to the property owner and the business owner of coming in and getting the permit is not relying on their non-conforming status, particularly if you've shortened that time up. They're at risk if their tenant moves off, if there's no permit associated with that address. They're at risk for a period of time until such time as they either get a permit or they quickly lease back up.
Are there any other questions?
And so,
Councilmember Harvey?
I don't. I wait. I'm learning all these things. Okay, from now on. Great. So the way that I kind of understood this was that with a non-conforming use, the issue that we have there is that it continues into perpetuity without city's discretion. Am I correct about that?
As the rules are.
Current rules.
As the current rules are today,
Okay.
yes, unless it's abandoned for over a year, in excess of a year. Yes.
And so the risk of leaving them as non-conforming uses, and even if, let's say, we go, okay, 6 months is what your abandonment period is now, we're going to shorten this time. If they're able to get somebody in for 6 months, then they're going to continue on in perpetuity. Correct?
It's possible, yeah.
Right. So even if we got to 2 months, then if they get in, you get where I'm going. So that's kind of how I understood the reason that we would go through this permitting scheme is that then you have to have a business owner that is basically like the boat, and then the other person's the property owner is like the anchor, right? And so if they're all in this kind of thing, that boat can go away and tie to another anchor. That anchor basically can't get another ship in. Is that, I mean, I'm making up this analogy on the fly right now, but which maybe is obvious. But like the way that I'm understanding it is the benefit of this is that if we go through this permitting scheme, you can't, a property owner could not have a new tasting room come in and they would not continue into perpetuity. They could come in, but they would only continue as long as that permit existed.
I'm not sure I'm entirely following the question, so I apologize for that. If they're legal non-conforming today, and if you don't shorten the time period, for the period of 1 year, under our current ordinance, they could get a new tenant in, and that new tenant would be fine. If you shorten the period, let's say whatever the shortened period is, arguably, we would be applying that to the new tenant, and it necks down the number of months that non-conforming status attaches. Now, if you're talking about somebody who has a permit, so they came in, no, that was the question.
So my question is about under the new scheme. The way I was understanding it through conversations was that under the new scheme, the business owner applies for it, right? And then if they leave and go to a new location, they come in and apply for a new permit, right? And they connect with a new landlord. At that time, the previous landlord is holding a permit, right? But that permit, that abatement period is much quicker than our non-conforming, right?
It could be, yes. In other words, you could take one of the suggestions staff has made is that permit, if it's abandoned, meaning somebody moves out, could be as short as 3 months. Where the new person would have to come in, get an ABC license issued, and be in business at that new location, at that old location within 3 months, or the non-conforming status or the existing permit status would be lost, meaning that permit would have expired. The other idea of making an administrative process for a ongoing tenant to renew and a hearing process for a new tenant to renew also disincentivizes the new tenant who is at risk. He comes in, he's only got 3 months left on a permit that's only a year long before it goes to a hearing as to whether or not it's not being renewed, versus the existing tenant who can administratively over the counter renew that permit. Again, trying to make it easy for one and harder in an opposite situation. Remember, though, that ABC permits can be transferred under a hearing process for the ABC. And staff's vision, at least for the transfer at an existing location, is if the business owner sells and sells his ABC permit to a successor in interest at the same location, that it would be transferable.
Okay.
The city permit would also be transferred.
So now I understand why Rachel was asking those questions. So how is that really functionally different than us just lowering the amount of time?
It is. It's just lowering the amount of time.
Okay,
That's
so this is the same. Okay. Effectively, is if we stayed with the current land use designation, and then we just lowered the amount of time that it took for that to go away.
It is essentially exactly trying to, by making some tweaks to what would be our existing use permit process specific to this type of use, trying to, I guess, limit the effects of the fact that we have so many existing that would then become non-conforming uses. I mean, at 31, that's a pretty big number. If you really only want 20.
Are there any other council questions?
Yes.
Councilmember Agramani?
Okay, thank you. First of all, if this was taken care of years ago when everybody said, please put a limit on wine tasting rooms, and they were, yeah. And everyone, the council assured everyone the market would take care of it. Well, guess what? It didn't. And that's why we're doing this craziness today. So I'd like to encourage the council to remember 10, 15 years ahead, if we make a decision, this is what it feels like when you have to go back into it. So all I wanted was to decrease the numbers. That's it. The other thing is I would love to be able to decrease that through attrition. And I don't care for passing on the permits. That's it. That's all I want. And now I've gotten it. Now I'm really in a quagmire. So, you know, I need some simple direction of where we're going. And it's just, this has gotten so convoluted. My laptop doesn't work. All my notes are gone. And it's no one's fault. It's, you know, the AI person. So that's where I am. So I really have no help. My notes were, you and I, Kathy, discussed this today about amortization. It seemed like it was something comfortable for me, but at this point, so I don't know where I am. I just wanted to remind everybody, this is what happens when you do something not so great in the beginning, and we end up with inheriting this.
Are there any other council questions? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to take it out to the public. If anyone would like to comment.
Good evening, City Council. Fred Allebach, 19550 8th Street East. Had a lot of thoughts about this. I've been involved in this right from the very start when there was half of the tasting rooms that there are now. And so it's obvious that this region as a Mediterranean climate is top premier wine area. So, I mean, wine is the horse to ride around here for the economy. It's just that it seems to be all top deck in Logan's ship metaphor. The workers are all down in steerage, and so it seems to me that this is an interesting exercise in trying to limit it, but it's not really addressing the kind of imbalance of the benefits that pay out from all the top deck of the wine. So this is a way that you can work on your economic policy to steer it and incentivize it one way or another, but it really doesn't address. And Logan has told me that the wine tasting jobs actually pay pretty well. So they may not even be in steerage on that metaphor. But the whole associated hospitality economy is one that has a lot of low pay to it. So you have your top deck guys. So I think that this is a really good staff presentation. I think it's got some really good stuff in it, and how to incentivize this great horse of Mediterranean climate premium wine economy, how to make that pay out to the guys who are, if you look at the stats in the county of the people who are working in this industry, these are the people who can't afford to come and taste any wine. So I think that kind of points towards, having a sustainable tourism policy and a sustainable economic development policy that hopefully will come out in the general plan process. That'll be an intentional type of steering of the ship here, so that we're not in a boom and bust kind of thing, because we had a place where there was half of the wine tasting and then the boom happened. Now a bust might be on us and people, oh, we need more. So then the policy's just being dictated by boom and bust and not intentionality. But we have a good horse with the wine and the climate. So I think the way to go about that somehow is to get into the incentives for the whole system, and I only have 20 seconds left, so I can't quite solve that problem tonight. But I think it's a great staff presentation, and good luck with making the decision.
Thank you, Fred. Anyone else?
David Eicher, E-I-C-H-A-R. I hope you've been able to read my emails. I've done a lot of thinking about this and took a while. First, the grape sourcing. It's very simple. Wine labels are required to have the source of the grapes. So if it's such as from the state, they say California. If they specify a county, 75% of the grapes have to be sourced from that county. If they specify an AVA, 75% at a minimum of the grapes have to be from that AVA. So it's very simple. If you want to, for enforcement, you go in the tasting room, look at the bottles, and say if they are sourced within the Sonoma County or an AVA. Simple, effective, efficient. Now, I think we do need some attrition. And I hate to throw anybody out that is currently in, but I understand also the SPVG wants to be able to move wine tasting to move from one location to another. The only way that's going to work is also if you have amortization. Otherwise, if you get as soon as you get one wine tasting moved from a grandfathered place to another place, a new place, if they get a tasting room permit, that old one, that vacant one, can then have a new wine tasting, a new winery come in. And, potentially you can get double, although that's not going to happen, but, you can get 10 additional ones. So if you want to reduce the number, you pick a number like 20, 25. You allow all the existing wineries to apply for a permit. There's no restrictions on the number or their location except their existing location. And they get a permit. And then after that, by attrition. So you have to do the amortization. Looking at moving, vacation rentals and tobacco retailers are not allowed to move locations. So if you want to allow to move locations, you've got to do amortization. If you don't do amortizations, you can't move location. Simple as that. I think you should reduce the abandonment down to even 2 months. Amortization should be 3 years, but if you want to go to 5, I don't think you need a lot because the owner of the property can bring in somebody else. And I would say numerical limits 20 in the downtown, 25 citywide. As Councilmember Agramonte mentioned, we need to look beyond. You need to look at something for the entire city so we don't get in the same situation 3 or 5 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no further public comment, I will close the public comment. Are there council member comments? Councilmember Hundley?
I have one question and then I have a few comments. The amortization, can it somehow be set to be a lease period? Like the amortization period is specific to however long the business's lease is? If it's based on the assumption that the tenants pay for the improvement, so the length of their lease would be the length that they have to make money back based on that location.
So I think the issue is the length of the lease is potentially only one component of what you'd have to consider under amortization. And every lease is potentially different. So I might have a 5-year lease with 3 2-year renewal periods that adds up to, forget it, I didn't do that math in advance, but you see what I mean? Let's say that ends up at being 12 years.
Well, I mean, it could be whatever, but I'm just saying if the lease ends, can that just, I mean, could that be the signal, like the period is if the lease ends and the amortization period ends because they can't make any money back on the property because they're not going to be there anymore?
I think that's one of the relevant factors to be considered. Most amortization periods tied to start out as a specific number of years, and then we could talk about what the relevant factors are for each consideration. But if you had somebody who, I don't know, started out at 1 year and moved in, did their tenant improvements, the amortization period for, I see what you're saying. You're saying they may not be able to guarantee they could stay there longer. Certainly never done any research into the issue of the length of the lease. Most of the amortization periods are tied more to a specific date with a specific amount of time assumed. And then those are factors to be considered, such as length of lease, amount of investment, etc.
Okay, well, I just curious about
I'm not
that.
saying it's impossible. I'm certainly not saying that's impossible.
Well, if that is something, I would like to throw it to another day. So as far as today, which I appreciate the thought put into this tasting room permit of trying to do something a little bit different, but what I don't want to do is create any situation where the business owner is uncertain as to how long they're going to be able to have their business. So even the thought of making people renew annually to keep their business stresses me out as a former business owner. So I definitely don't want to do that. You know, with our like license scheme, it was supposed to be about empowering the business owner because the reality is our downtown area is owned by a relatively small number of individuals, and that has sort of led to the climate that we have. So I'm not interested in anything that's going to make someone who decides to open up a shop somewhere, like they already have to worry about their lease ending and getting booted, so that's enough risk on that. So I'd rather go a more traditional use permit route. However, a few other components are that when it comes to deciding what a healthy business district looks like, I don't think that you can look at one piece separate from the others. So what I'm interested in doing for now is kind of creating a situation that we can have to carry us through our entire general plan process. We're going to do an economic development study. We're going to have to do some code updates. You know, this can be years. And something that's going to put us in a position where we can implement, you know, a healthy policy for our downtown area. So based on that, I do think that we have too many tasting rooms. I would like to set our total number slightly below where we are. And so the 31 number, is that citywide or is that that's the entire citywide? Do you know what the number is for the downtown planning district?
Yeah, I think we showed in the prod there's 26, and then there's 5 outside of the prod.
Okay.
5 outside or in the downtown district?
Yeah.
So are there none outside the downtown planning district? Because in that 31?
I believe there's one in a mixed-use district, which is outside.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, I didn't bring. I'm sorry, I didn't bring the one where I put a little scattergraph showing where they were all outside of the prod, but they're close to the prod anyway.
Okay. Well, the concept would be I like looking at the downtown planning district because I do think that there's some offshoots that were not covered in the Plaza Retail Overlay District that certainly feel like they're a part of it. And, you know, whether it's just taking it down like 3 spots, which would just sort of keep things at a stasis, and then as natural attrition occurs, then maybe there'll be opportunities for new places. But when in conjunction with that, and one of the things that we had talked about last time that other places have not had success with is that, with the use permit and it being very valuable to have a tasting room, that landlords would much rather have an empty storefront rather than let some other use come in, and therefore they would lose their vested right or their non-conforming use. So I would like to shrink the abandonment time, and I would like to make it 2 months. So that way, either they got plans for someone else to move in, that's awesome, but if they don't, then it's just time for it to be something else. And I think that that will help us sort of get down to a level that is more acceptable to the people that live here, and that will also give us some room to implement a better strategy when we actually have sort of the data and the plan for that. And then the whole amortization part of it, it just sounds crazy, so I'm not really interested in that either. But, so the components that I'm interested in are the downtown planning district, a number that is slightly lower than it is now, a short abandonment time, and then the other two that I would love to talk to my colleagues about are, I also don't want to create something that's like so complicated, which part of a lot of these components, it's like really complicated. So whether there's separation requirements, I don't think so because of the number, but then block face requirements, the one place that I would be interested in having a limit would be properties that touch the plaza, and that includes the corners. But the alleys, not interested in putting any more limitations on that. And then I think the rest of it just with the number. But I think that anything that is directly touching the plaza, including corners.
David?
Yeah, this one's been a hard one. I understand a lot of the issues that we have with the tasting rooms. A lot of residents. I've spoken with a lot of people. Like I said at the meeting that we were talking about this before, I do agree with Councilmember Hunley that making it too convoluted could really cause a problem. So I want to thank staff. IT always says I say that, but for meeting with me today and having the discussion about this. I understand what Agramonte says about too many tasting rooms. It's 31. But going back to the history of Sonoma, we heard about the cheese, we heard about all these things that we have. One thing that is out of balance would be the wine tasting rooms. But like I said in the meeting before when we were talking about this, one thing I think we might be missing the boat on is that we should be looking at if there's new tasting rooms coming in where there is retail. And probably that number would be 30% of non-wine to try to get the tourist to go to the downtown area. What I'm afraid of is if we limit, and this is where government control sometimes backfires. As a business owner, I know that more regulations, people start moving. They start moving out of our little 2 mile by 2 mile area heading, and you start having, your roads are being used up, everything, but your downtown is drying up a little bit. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm saying that, with an economy that is based so much on wine tasting and with the restaurants and everything else, that could be something that could happen in the future. So that's just a caution. I'm not saying that it'll happen. I kind of came to this meeting with the fact that, given direction back to staff, is we have 31 tasting rooms. If we do want to bring that down, we got to figure out what that looks like, because when you start bringing something down, the market's going to get higher. The Sutter Homes, the Gallows, all these bigger companies who you don't even know are bigger companies because they're, you think that you're going to St. Anne's Crossing, but it might be owned by somebody else. And, Buena Vista, they own Deloche, they own Raymond. I mean, they're a big conglomerate. So sometimes you can kind of be fooled by, what are you really attending? So that's why government interaction really concerns me on this. And I was hoping we would kind of go through the matrix, and I assume that we will here a little bit. I don't have the answer. I wish I did. But I know when Tony Mole came the other day from the Three Fat Guys, talking about how he would like to sell, his wine in Sonoma. He grew up in Sonoma. He played football here. He has a family. They're totally invested with, with restaurants and different things. Pulling somebody away like that, concerns me. So I would want to make this be an even playing field. So if we do think that we have a concern, what I would do, if it was up to me, but it's not, I'm only 1/5 of the council, is just do a limit on the 31 existing at this point, and then take a look at new tasting room and do the 30% non-wine retail. And we can look into local grape sourcing. I know I've been asked by a lot of people, what does that mean? I was asked by staff. I am in the industry, and what David Eichhardt said earlier, I totally agree with. Labels do show that, but being from the wine industry, I do know that there's a lot of the grapes that I grow go to Napa, and a lot of the tasting rooms that I visit here, have Napa wine coming over. Some have Lodi coming over, and they have to do that for their bottle price. If you really limit it to local grape sourcing, you might think that you're helping it. But if a company can't add 15% of Lodi fruit, they're going to be selling their bottle for $50 on the square, and nobody's going to buy it. It's sad to say, but I told them today that it's true. Grapes don't come with UPC codes. The industry, it is what it is. We love it and we hate it. But I think what I'm seeing right here, I'll probably be voting against most of this, but I'm open, and I just want staff to know that I think that we might want to look at a direction that isn't so complicated. And I would like a guy like Tony Mole to be able to come in, Tony Mole, to be able to come in here and sell his brand. And if you see, there's a lot of where Pangloss used to be. There used to be a wine tasting facility that had, I think they had 8 labels. I forget the name of it, but they went under. And I think they went under because of, or they left. I don't know if they went under, but they left, and I think a lot of it was the pressure coming in from other companies and the rents being raised too high. So sometimes you try to do a good thing and you make it a bad thing. So that's my 2 cents.
Logan, Madeline?
So I really share David's concern that we'll have large companies come over and take over, and I really want to create opportunities for smaller business owners. It's what we have largely on the plaza right now, or smaller mom and pop. Some of them are backed by wealthy donors, but they're not part of a larger conglomerate. So I would wonder if there was a way that we could limit that, if there was some way that we could limit it based on business size or cases produced or something like that. Might be a way that we could limit the chances of a larger company, a larger corporation coming in. Right now, I think on the plaza, you might be looking at, most of these places are probably under 30,000 cases produced, would be my guess. On grape sourcing, I'm interested in that just because I'm interested in having Sonoma Valley wines represented, but I'd like to see if we got into that at all, I'd want it to be a very low percentage of your overall portfolio that you have, so that you could have a couple. So every winery has to have a couple wines that are from Sonoma Valley at the very least. And then the question is, what do we define as Sonoma Valley? Are we also considering Carneros? Are we considering Petaluma Wind Gap? All that kind of stuff. So we'd have to be really careful about which AVAs we choose. But I would be interested in that at, say, 10-20% of the company's overall portfolio, just because it keeps the branding Sonoma. And I think that that's kind of a good thing. I'm a little bit concerned. I think one of the things, I mean, I wasn't a member of council, but I watched the council meeting when the initial scheme was discussed, and one of the goals was, and I've talked to a couple viticulturists in town, and there's a serious worry that their rents are going to massively raise once we impose an ordinance like this. So allowing them to kind of move to a new place is great, but I am concerned if we go with the current scheme of the non-conforming, that those locations are going to be able to get a place in there, and those businesses are going to continue into perpetuity, and we're not going to be able to regulate that. And so if we're going to try to have a real number, then we have to make sure that if somebody moves, somebody can't come behind them and then continue into perpetuity. And I think that was kind of the goal of city staff's ordinance that they were building. And I liked that, but it's gotten a little bit confusing. I agree with Councilmember Hunley's point about not wanting a business owner to feel the stress of coming in every single year. I've never been a business owner, but that is definitely a concerning point. But I think the goal of staff was to create a system where it would be, you'd be pretty assured as a business owner that you'd be okay, but that's always a risk, right? You never know for sure. I definitely don't want the city of Sonoma to be in the business of closing down any of the existing tasting rooms. I think that would be a horrible thing for us to do. I think it would look bad. I think it would feel bad. I think everybody would be really upset by that. So I think the current existing number of tasting rooms that are on the plaza, we should allow them some way to continue. If every single place that's on the plaza right now continues for the next 30 years, whatever, great, good to them. They've created a successful business. I would, where are we at? 31 right now. I would be okay with limiting it a little bit. I would be looking at, maybe 28 or so. Maybe by limiting it by 5 I'd be fine with that. Oh, yeah. That's 3? Oh, 5. So I would go as high as 5, reduction of 5. I should know the math on that. What's that? 26? Yeah. Yes, nailed it. I agree with Mr. Alabak that we really do need to start looking at ways that we can, because I think a lot of this contention comes from the fact that members of our community feel like there's a big change that's happened, and that's definitely true. There is a large change that's happened with all of these tasting rooms coming on, and they see the negative effects of it. They see more traffic, harder to park on the plaza, more tourists who are intoxicated. They see negative effects, right? And this costs our city money with DUIs, with damage to the plaza, all these kinds of problems. And we need to find a way, and we can't do it tonight with this ordinance, but we need to find a way to make sure that we grab some revenue from our kind of largest industry and use that to benefit the city, to provide for capital improvements, to provide for things that everybody uses and enjoys, and then they can go, okay, it's good that we have these wineries here because they actually provide this other benefit beyond jobs. And a lot of the best jobs in Sonoma, my fiance works at a winery, not on the plaza, but in the space. I've worked at a tasting room on the square as well, and my pay was relatively good, and my health care was covered. And so these are some of the best paying jobs, at least in the front of house. In the back of the house, in the production side and things like that, you have a different situation going on, certainly. But I don't want to remove that too much. For plaza facing, I think the block face requirements and including the corners is smart. I think that's appropriate. That's kind of the forward facing. I think the alley requirements, having no alley requirements, I'm good with. Are there any other points? Yeah, that's where I'm at. Pretty much.
Logan, what about, geographic area?
Oh, okay, yeah. I would like to limit it primarily on the plaza and near the plaza. I would be somewhat okay with some experimentation in other commercial zoning. So like if you look at, where Whole Foods and there is now, that whole area is now, there's areas of Sonoma that could maybe use some revitalization, that could use some different opportunities, and people want to take a shot at it. Maybe creating that opportunity would be something I'd be okay with, but if the rest of the council doesn't agree, it's something we can talk about. What else? Are there any other points that other people had made? No, I think we're pretty much good there. Yeah.
Okay. I have something, yeah. So I'm sorry, the total was 31, and how many on the plaza? 25?
26.
26? Okay.
Excuse me, that's
So with
26
five,
within
it's
the Plaza
31.
Retail Overlay District.
Okay.
Let me just show you the map.
All right, so I agree with, I'm not leaning towards approving this, but I agree with what Councilmember Hundley and I think Harvey have suggested, and as well as David with respect to the plaza and the corners, you know, what you suggested with respect to that. I'm still, I don't know how we get to attrition. I don't know, up to the stairs, down to the basement, across, out a window, and over on the roof. I don't know how we're ever going to get that. And the other thing I don't like is not passing those. I don't like passing the permits on to other businesses. Logan, thank you so much for mentioning our residents. These are the people, you know, who were not real happy. And unfortunately, I think the letter that we received from vintners and growers sort of said, just a few people. That's not a few people. People talk about this quite a bit. And, you know, it's changing times here in Sonoma. It's very uncomfortable for people. However, the issues of traffic and parking, those are our issues. They shouldn't be the wineries or wine tasting or anyone else's issues. They should be our issues, because we're the ones that are have to take care of that. And I've heard some real positive things today about Casa Grande parking lot. So I'm hoping some of that will be cleared up. So, I mean, I'm still at the same place with this, and but I appreciate just mentioning the people who live here. And, you know, sometimes it's very uncomfortable, I think, to see some of the wine tasting rooms. And very, you know, I don't know, that's just how I feel. So I don't know how I'm going to vote. I'm just telling you this is the things that come to my attention. And, you know, I agree with much of what everyone says, but I don't like the convoluted way we're going to do this, so.
Okay. I guess the difficult part about this, obviously, is that there's a variety of interests that we would like to take into consideration. We'd like to, of course, take into consideration the concerns and rights of the citizens who live here, and we would also like to take into consideration the needs and desires of the business owners who contribute to our economy. And so I think we have all really struggled to find the right balance between recognizing that we have hardworking people that have started businesses and that they're doing their best to, you know, create a vibrant economy and provide for their own families. And we also have the irritation that exists because of you know, just from having a business here, and then there being, you know, a certain number now, which has made those irritations very noticeable to the people that live here. So I think I appreciate the staff's effort to craft some sort of permitting system, and it really feels to me like we just don't have the tools available to regulate this in a way that would allow us to achieve a good balance. And that is really unfortunate, because to the extent that we could create a licensing scheme which would empower the business owner, that was kind of a remedy that really would achieve both goals by listening to the needs of the wine tasting room owners and also the public. So I'm disappointed, not in the staff, but disappointed that we don't have the appropriate tools available to us to regulate them in a way that is the least painful for everybody. And so that's pretty unfortunate. And I also think, as a second matter, that in terms of making a decision and also for the business owners, we don't have the economic data to support any particular number. And so it does feel a little bit like pulling a number out of a hat about what is the right number. And that is deeply uncomfortable. So the number is less than we have now, but more than nothing. And that's a wide gap to be discussed. I think that the appropriate time to create like lasting regulation about this is during the general plan update, when we have people putting real thought into our economy and our zoning. That would be ideal. But since we don't have the luxury of that time to wait till then, we'll have to make some decisions tonight. So all that being said, in terms of the total number, I do think that it's too high right now. And the numbers that have been thrown out about reduction through attrition have been between 2 and 5. That's what I've heard, and we could have discussion about that. I would support anywhere in there. I think that the downtown planning district is the appropriate level to regulate at, really to try our best to avoid kicking the can down the road, to just have to deal with regulating this later once it's become a more contentious. With regard to the abandonment period, I think a 2-month abandonment period is appropriate. And then I agree about having a limit on the number that would face the plaza, including the corners. And I don't have the same concerns about the alleyways or not blocks facing the plaza. But and then I really would like to make sure that this issue is addressed again during the general plan update, and that we have more economic data, and that we can make a more precise decision at that time, because this is very difficult to meet the needs of all parties involved, in the spirit that I know we would all like to do. So those are my thoughts.
One other question, Mayor Harrington, amortization.
I'm not really interested in that, and I think that creates a super complex process, and then also it sort of incentivizes people to invest the maximum amount to make it just sort of incentivizes people to engage in strategic planning to ensure that they can continue to operate, in perpetuity, or as long as they can kind of drag it out. So.
So for the most part, I think we heard on most of looking at the matrix, just because that was our tool for addressing I think we heard from the majority of the council on almost all of these. One I think we didn't hear from the majority of the council on is who approves the permit. Council's options in that regard are, do you want it to be a staff level permit, a planning commission level permit with appeal to the city council, or straight to the city council permit. So I don't think we heard from anybody on that issue, so I'll sort of circle us back to there. And
I think it should be at the planning commission level.
I also think the planning commission, and I know that we had talked before about whether there'd be some effort to get current non-conforming uses in compliance with this somehow, or maybe it's separate if we're doing more of a traditional use permit. But I would only want, like, after the number gets down to, say, if the number's 26, when we get to number 25, then our new number 26 will be the new system. Because otherwise, you got to guess who's going to leave, and you don't know.
so I think everybody would be subject to the new system unless you declare otherwise.
Wouldn't they
Now I
just
say subject to, meaning they might not all be able to get one if you're set the number at 26. But
No, they'd be a non-conforming use.
there's a strategy sometimes with when you set a non-conforming use that a property owner will choose to make themselves subject to it in order to.
Right, but if we're picking who's going to stay and who's not, and the goal is that, over time, 5 businesses move on to somewhere else, we can't guess which 5 that is, so I'd rather just leave it open, and who
applies, applies.
Yeah, and it just is, and that's the day that it starts.
So if you set the number less than the current number, no one not currently there theoretically could apply. Does that make sense to you? Did I state that right?
No
You
one
already
would
have
be applying until
the number drops
Yeah,
below
so
the.
it's going to be
yes.
a while before any of this kicks in.
Correct. It's essentially freezing you where you are right now until whatever that number is, 225, which we've heard so far, go out of business.
So,
Or choose to relocate somewhere else.
Or choose to relocate
Doesn't mean
outside
that
the
they're going
regulated area. That's true too.
Councilmember Harvey?
so if we're basically letting them stay non-conforming uses, we can change the rate at which they lose that permit, the abandonment rate. So we can change that to a non-conforming use. Okay.
So I heard two PCs? Two choices
I
for the
agree
planning
with the-
commission? Okay,
the PC.
3. Planning commission?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Councilmember Cook?
So I guess I'm a little confused because I did answer one question, but I thought I'd said it, but I think it should be citywide. And I'm just saying that because I'd hate to see we lose our downtown to another area that where anybody who can't get a tasting room here would end up finding some other place that's outside of that. So I would, if we were going to go that direction, I definitely want it to be citywide. But what I was trying to figure out is, you said there's 31. Are you counting Safeway and Whole Foods who have wine tasting? What would you call that then?
Grocery store.
What they do at Safeway?
I don't know what kind of license they have to get there, but it's not a type 2 or what that we're looking at regulating. So they might have some kind of a one-day tasting or something. That maybe we'll have to look, but it's a different type of license.
Okay.
There's a way to do events.
So the city attorney thinks they do it as kind of doing events. Something with
And
grocery
then
stores.
the other thing that I wanted to make sure that if we do limit it to a certain number, so if it sounds like we're not doing citywide, so it sounds like there's more. One of my colleagues would like to do the historical overlay district or that area. If that number is set at 25, then that would make those rents go really high up when any of these leases. If somebody has a 1-year lease left and the landlord kicks them out, that would really open the door to getting rents even higher, is the way I look at it.
Actually, I totally disagree because I think that the whole point of shrinking the abandonment period is because right now, even right now, there's spots that have had tasting rooms and they leave and they just sit empty for a long time, and it's because they can and they're just waiting for their price. But with a 2-month abandonment period, you have 2 months to find someone, and if you don't find someone, you're going to lose it, and they're not going to want to lose it. So I think, one, it's going to make them less likely to jack up the rent on their current tenant because it's so uncertain whether they can replace them. And then 2, they got 2 months. So you can't really, you have far less leverage when you have a very short period of time to fill your space or you're going to lose your use.
Yeah, but in all due respect, everybody has leases. I mean, even myself, I have leases and I have evergreens. And when that comes up, if you don't have the evergreen, that landlord could find somebody within that 2-month period because they would know that it's coming. And to have a transfer come in, if you look at Kenwood, they have all those tasting rooms down there that they could be making calls before that lease comes up. Because I don't know how the lease situation is on the plaza, but I assume that this would put all of our tasting rooms who are in business today, could put them out of business within the next 5 to 10 years, just due to the having the rents go up. And I think earlier what the council was talking about was trying to keep the business, not keep it with the land, but we found out that we can't do that.
Right.
So kind of like Mayor Harrington did say, this might be something we can't even do, but I think for the residents of Sonoma and for the wine industry and for everyone, we do have to come up with a number. But I think that we have to be very careful, and that's why, not that I'm beating a dead horse, but I think that if we did go where we allowed some retail to be with wine tasting, I think that's the new Amazon. I really do believe that when I first came to Sonoma, there was a lot of that. There was art, like the Span Mountain over there, where now, I forget who's in there, but they had art there. So it was this mixed use within the businesses, and that helps them thrive. I know how much they were paying rent. They weren't paying a lot of rent there because it was two businesses in the same existing building. And all I want to do is make sure that we protect the the farmer, the one who's growing it and selling it. And I talk about larger corporations are like that. I mean, a lot of large corporations, like it or not, are family owned. Sometimes they don't get the benefit of being called a family farm, but it's just because they've grown throughout the generations. So my point being that this goes back to the Planning Commission, I'd at least like to say that one council member was very concerned about rents being really high due to a limit on the tasting rooms. But that same council member does not have the answer of how we can go through this. So, and that's why we're doing this process.
What is the shortest period of abandonment that's allowed?
So we know from one case, so there's not a lot of available data here, but we know from at least one case where a city said 60 days, but did not provide a notice and a hearing. The court jammed the city for not providing notice in the hearing within that 60-day period. So in that circumstance, it was a situation akin to what we're talking about. Business owner had a alcohol-related business. The alcohol-related business was suspended for a period of 60 days, and city said, 60-day period, you're out. And the court said, no, you've got to give them notice and a hearing. We are also, based on some information in that case, fairly confident that tying to the loss of a permit, which means if you actually voluntarily went out of business for a 60-day period or you got up and moved, obviously that's voluntary out, that would probably be okay. I don't think I would ever suggest that less than 60 days would be okay. I think 60 might be pushing our luck depending on why it's open, why it's abandoned for 60. And there may be a lot of discussion about intent to abandon in terms of hearings during those 60-day periods. However, if the council wants to try 60 days, I think it's something we could make an argument for and put a lot of findings into the ordinance about why we're making it so short. And if the majority wants to do that, I think it's something that staff would try to support and get behind that with some good findings.
And so at the end, so during the 60-day period, we need to give them a notice and a hearing?
Correct.
And how will we know that there's a vacancy?
We're going to have to really pay attention to them, I think, is the issue.
I mean, I guess the question would be, can we send a notice to the landlord now that says, if you have a 60-day vacancy, you will be, you will forfeit your rights to have this use in the future, and you need to request a hearing and send it to them currently?
I think that's a good idea. I don't know that that will be wholly enforceable, but I do think that we should A, send out notice. B, we should create the list we were talking about, who's in what locations as of what dates, because I do think that that's important to establishing what our baseline is, so that if we get into an argument about what has or hasn't occurred, we can have that discussion about produce your lease for your new person, when did they go in, and you can start to see the gaps.
Can the ordinance include a requirement that a landowner notify the city when the premises are vacated?
I think we can include such a provision. I think it's a good idea to conclude such a provision. I could not tell you today whether I think that provision would be wholly enforceable, but I think it's a good idea.
Okay, so we would have to say, include it in the ordinance and then send out notice really to all of the people, all of the possible business locations, and say, if you have this use and it becomes vacant, it's your obligation to notify us of the vacancy, and you can then request a hearing?
I think that's true, and I think we should probably send out a summary of sort of a notice that, obviously there'll be a public hearing notice and the whole regulated area will receive it. But once the regulations are adopted, I think it's a good idea to send the second notice to them saying, and this is what they are, so that they have a clear understanding of what they are. And we can highlight things like, this is what you're required to do under the ordinance.
Thanks.
Just as a quick note, this last slide here, again, refers you back to the process that we need to go through in order to provide some direction for staff and also to get that to the Planning Commission in order to return back to your council.
Councilmember Harvey?
So I do have a question. Under this current scheme that we're kind of pursuing now, is it going to be possible for an existing tasting room that, we're beyond if we set a lower limit, is it going to be possible for an existing tasting room to move locations or not?
No.
And then, yeah.
Does staff have any additional information they need from the council?
Well, one thing I guess I was just asking the city attorney because I want to make sure that process-wise we're clear on this. So at this point, since, and understand the direction council wants to go, it's more of a traditional use permit process versus this administrative process we were talking about. Under that, we would, each of the existing, I just want to be clear, each of the existing folks would have to go through some kind of conditional use process, go through planning commission.
No.
That's not what you want to do. Good. That's not what I want to have happen either. But
So
I want
let
to
me
talk about.
let me say back what I think the majority has said here today. That is that we are going to allow them as existing non-conforming uses, all of them now, which we are required to do. We are going to reduce the number that is allowable by between 2 and 5. We have not decided on that number. After the number of tasting rooms has declined through attrition, if and when that does happen, then the first person to apply under the new scheme would apply for a use permit, and that would go to the Planning Commission. But none of that would occur until such time as there were through attrition, the number of tasting rooms had gone down, and the time for abandonment would be 2 months. And so in terms of trying to create some balance between empowering the landlord and empowering the business owner, the landlords would be incentivized to not hold out for the highest price, but to re-rent right away, or they would risk losing their ability to have a tasting room in their facility. That's what I think most people said. Feel free to correct me if that's wrong.
One question of one point of clarification. During the non-conformance period, we have our 31 non-conforming. If somebody voluntarily wants to come in and apply for a permit during that period, they can.
They could apply, but it cannot be approved because no use permits are going to be given out until such time as the total number has been reduced through attrition.
Okay, that was the piece of clarification that I was looking for. You want to, again, until the number drops to the 20.
Between 2 and 5 less. Yeah.
We'll play that game, whichever you land on. Until it drops, no permits can be issued at all, even to an existing non-conforming use.
Right.
Even though they're one of the 31 or 26 or whatever.
Right.
Okay.
And then the only thing that I think we did not have a consensus on, because there was a number of different things said, was what the number of like maybe the Planning Commission will talk about this, but what is the actual block face limit? And then also 2 people said the downtown planning district, and then there was no 3 people did not agree on what the area would be for regulation.
I think that's something we can report to the Planning Commission too, because I'm sure they'll go through the same struggle.
Okay.
And that's frankly an easy change once it finally comes back in terms of if you want to change.
So, Madam Mayor, am I hearing that this is just, you're taking our comments and we don't have to vote, so we're not voting? Or?
Right, so all of this is going to be reported back to the planning commission, and then they'll bring us back a proposal.
All right, so in December, I think when you made your suggestion that it was just suggested, I was so happy because I said, you know, that sounds like it can work, but it can't.
I wish
right?
it could, yeah.
And so I have to honestly say, I feel better than I did about, I don't know, half an hour ago, because I think we actually have a basis for us to move forward. And so I'm really happy about that. And this is something, what you have suggested as you defined it, I feel more comfortable because there has to be an end to this thing.
I agree, yeah.
Thank you.
Mayor Harrington, if I could, not beat the boat too much, but we would be creating an ordinance to take to the planning commission based on your comments this evening.
There was only one thing that you didn't touch on, and I'm assuming it's because no one was interested in it, but tenant space size limitations.
No.
Okay, got it.
I mean,
Just-
for me, no.
Just making sure that no one was interested in that. Okay.
Thank you for asking.
And I just want to, going back through notes, the only other, a couple of folks talked about grape sourcing. David talked about it kind of being complicated and how to do it. Logan was, if there's a lower threshold, so maybe there's some Sonoma Valley involvement, but kind of a way to, there's some Sonoma Valley presence without making it too complicated is, I think, what I heard from you. But I'm not sure that in terms of the sourcing, is this something from the other folks that is important to look at, or something we should kind of?
Councilmember Harvey.
Yeah, I want to ask David what he thinks about that idea. If we just had a small percentage that you were required to have, so some amount of Sonoma Valley wine was represented, but the majority of your portfolio could be other things, do you think that makes sense or no?
Yeah, I think it does make sense when you're talking a lower threshold number like 20 to 30%. But I'd want to use the word Sonoma County just because that's what that's where the trend is going from. I mean, if you buy something from Sonoma Valley, it's probably going to have it'll have Sonoma County, or it could be Carneros, or it could be what's the other appellation that's huge? But I would want it to. There's another one I can't remember now. But anyway, I would say that Sonoma County at like 30%.
Yeah, I don't think that would affect a lot of the tasting rooms that we have on the plaza right now. I think most of them are Sonoma County if we go that broad, for sure. But
Councilmember Hundley?
I would rather leave something like that for consideration after this, since we have a tight timeline to turn this one around, because it just seems like far more of an administrative and regulatory burden to keep track of that. And I found meaningful at our last meeting, vintners and growers were not interested in that, which I was surprised because I would think that Sonoma Valley Wine would want to protect themselves from other places that would love to market here, even though they don't have any wine from here, but they weren't attracted to that either. So I just think that's way too complicated. I'd rather focus on something that we can enforce.
And I did, just to let council, I did touch base today with Maureen Cottingham to kind of talk about this again briefly. A number of her folks were not able to be here today. And we threw out the issue of similar to kind of what St. Helena's done, the 75%. And I think, again, following up on what Councilmember Hundley said, her basic email to me was the requirements of they talked a lot about it because they did really want to try to figure something out, but overall they felt like regulating was just complicated and could be risky. And so there were some pros and cons, and something that they couldn't kind of come to a consensus. So with that being said, I just want to pass that along.
Councilmember Cook?
Yeah, I would say that 30% wouldn't concern anybody. And it was Sonoma Coast is what the other appellation is.
Well, I don't think we have any mechanism for enforcing that, even if it would be not particularly difficult, because it's not that checking the wines is difficult. It doesn't require any particular skill other than literacy. But we don't have the ability to enforce a number of rules, and I don't think that's one that we would be able to enforce. I just don't see us having the staff. We're gonna send code enforcement out to, go and check the labels and find out if 30% are from Sonoma. I mean, it doesn't sound enforceable to me. Practically speaking, I don't think we can enforce that. So, Councilmember Agarwani?
No.
Okay. All right. The staff have any other questions on this matter?
No, appreciate the thoughts, kind of chewing it all through and getting council's perspective. So we will be moving fast, quickly to create an ordinance to get it to planning commission and then back to you so that it can be implemented before May 1.
Okay. I'd like to take a 5-minute break before the next item.
And before we take the break, I know we approved the agenda, but it's going to be very late. We have 3 more items, and I think this next one reserves. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'd like to know if we could move it to another council meeting, as long as there's no deadline involved.
I don't have a problem with that. Is that possible?
There's no deadline on it.
Okay.
So, process-wise? What? Oh.
Thank you.
You could just continue.
Oh,
You can
okay.
decide to continue the item and.
Oh, okay.
I throw in. Thanks.
Well, in that case, perhaps we will not take a break if we're not going to dive into a lengthy item. So for item 7.4, do we need to make a motion to continue it, or?
It's not a public hearing, so no.
No, that's all right. If the consensus of the council is continue, then we'll continue it to the next meeting.
Okay. Item 7.5, discussion and direction on updates to appointments for ad hoc council subcommittees focusing on council initiatives. City manager, take it away.
All right, so I don't think it needs to be very intensive, council, but basically you do have a number of key initiatives. And in front of you in your agenda pack is a list of who's currently assigned. So there are 2 council ad hocs where there are no council members assigned. One is the Broadway Streetscape and the other is the Plaza and Depot Park. And then again, assignments have been made on the others, but if council wants to revisit any of those, you can do that as well. So, looking for direction.
Okay. Are there any council member questions? Seeing none, we'll take it out to the public. There's no members of the public present, so we will not have any public comment on this matter. Bringing it back to the council for comments and discussion.
Well,
Councilmember Agarwani?
Sure. The cemetery assessment and strategy, I'm happy that it's going away for me because, I just hope something wonderful happens. The only thing I wanted to mention, I think there were 2 issues. I think 2nd Street East, a lot of work has gone into the top of that street, putting in the gate because of issues with kids, and whatever's going on up there. And so I just wanted to share with everyone that I think, what's her name, from the hospital, Jane Hirsch, and her community within that, all of the condos up there worked very hard to get garbage out of there, all of those things. And I understand there may be a bequest out there that wants to possibly improve that area. But I want whomever is working on this to remember that is an issue at this point. And we involved police and volunteers and everything just to work on that one issue. So I just wanted to let you know that's what happened. And I actually passed the cemetery binder over to that gives a great history of this issue. So I'm very happy about this. My other thing, of course, I think this is a short committee. It's got a deadline. I'd like to stay on the homelessness contract with Sonoma Overnight Support with Councilmember Hundley. The others, I'm very comfortable with.
Okay. Anyone else? Comments? Thoughts?
No.
No?
So I just want to, the two, we do have two fairly large initiatives that we were hoping to kick off, and I know that Colleen Ferguson, our Public Works Director, for the Broadway and the Plaza Depot, we would appreciate having a council subcommittee. If there can't be two, if there can be one, it just is helpful to chew through some of these issues with council, so.
What about referring that to the CSCC? Sorry.
Well, if you want.
The Plaza and Depot Park enhancement and connectivity is something that I would like to work on. I just didn't want to take it from anybody else. They wanted it.
Okay. So what do we have left? Broadway?
So Rachel, we have Broadway. So the other piece on this, we could, again, staff could try to drive this, and if we do need to touch base, maybe we touch base with the mayor and vice mayor, if there are kind of a bit of a pulse check we need or something like that, if that's maybe another way to do it, that it's not.
Councilmember Cook?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it should go to the mayor and vice mayor. I mean, if needed.
That's
fine. I'm comfortable.
Could that be a committee that is led from the planning commission?
I think there's some broader issues, some strategic questions here, some things that are about traffic, vision. If you wanted to have one member of the planning commission and maybe one member of the council, it would be another way. But again, part of these items were to talk initially about getting some work plan stuff together and kind of a strategic forward so staff could do some pulse checks. And then, so some of these committees, once maybe there is a broader how we're going to move it forward, may not require much work from the ad hoc either. Again, so some of these I think we could do an initial to help us scope things, get it, and then we could come back and say, do we need these to continue? We're going to go to full council, or we're going to have an advisory group, or what that looks like. So,
Councilmember Harvey?
I'll be the point person on it. That's fine.
Great. Nothing further on this item?
No, thank you. We do, actually, could have a motion to, and I'll state it, maybe to appoint Vice Mayor Harvey, for the Broadway Streetscape, and Councilmember Hunley for the Plaza Depot.
So moved. Yeah.
Second?
Roll call. Please.
Councilmember Henley,
Aye.
Councilmember Cook,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yeah.
Councilmember Agramonte.
Aye.
Mayor Harrington.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Moving on to item 7.6, discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding the mayor's annual assignment of council members to various boards and committees.
Could I just jump in for a minute? I'm sorry on this. There are a couple of mistakes here. So one, Daniel Mulrath is no longer the general manager. I don't know who's taken his place. And I guess we were mentioning Cheetah Slow. I think somewhere in here it said if there's committees that have never met, and I think Gary Edwards was assigned to that. I just wanted to mention, maybe we could just do away with, that was it.
Oh, the Citaslow? Uh-huh.
The Citaslow, we've tried to make contact with the either national and international group. They don't return calls. There's
Well,
no
it's real slow.
communication.
Everybody's
very
getting
good.
Ba-dum-bum. It seems to have de
Sorry.
facto kind of gone away.
I think we could, we can assign somebody, but, or eliminate it, I don't know. What's
You have the ability to,
The big E word, eliminate.
you have the ability to do either. So this is discussion and direction on updates to appointments. So if there is something that you want to say, we're going to get rid of, you can do that.
I prefer to just leave it there, and if they respond to us in their slow time, then we'll have somebody on there. So,
Okay.
I have a bunch of copies here. Did the staff hand this out already, or I'm handing it
No,
out?
we have not handed out. So again, these are mayor appointments, and so I'll turn it back to Mayor Harrington.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. All right, well, I've handed out the appointments. I don't know what else you'd like me to say. Feel free to review them, and Are we taking public comment on this?
Yes.
Okay. Does the council have any questions? No questions? I'll take it out to the public for public comment. No public, closing public comment, and I will bring it back to the council for comments.
Let's see.
Councilmember Cook?
I would like to get off the Library Advisory Committee. Yes.
Okay.
I thought you loved the library.
I've been on it for the last 6 years, so.
Oh, that is a long time.
It's time.
Okay.
I've always wanted to be on the library committee.
Okay. Well, we'll switch that up, and Councilmember Hunley can be the appointee to the library. I think you're the alternate right now, correct?
Yeah.
Councilmember Cook, would you be willing to be the alternate? For the library?
Yes, I can be the alternate, but I would like to take myself off of the alternate of the the Sonoma Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency.
Hold on. I wish these were numbered. Wait. Okay, wait. For the... Hold on. Okay. Getting there. You want to be off the Water Advisory Committee?
Yes, the GSA.
I'm not... Hold on. I'm sorry. Oh, okay.
It's like the last one.
Okay. So the library is going to be Rachel and David switched. And then the Groundwater Sustainability Agency, I have it as Rachel and David. And you're saying you do not want to be the alternate?
Correct.
Okay. Does somebody else want to be the alternate on that?
I could be the alternate on that.
Anyone else? No, I'm not objecting to. Okay, well, Logan can be the alternate. Okay, are there any other comments? Okay.
So we just need council to, that's it? Nope, because there's no ratification on these.
Yeah, I have one more question. I'm still reading this through. The Sonoma Valley Citizens Advisory Commission. I would not want to be the representative on that.
Well, I mean, I guess the issue is that we have various boards that we have to go to, and they all require a certain amount of time that we're all putting into it. And unless somebody else wants to be on it, it only seems fair. I mean, you have to be on something that requires some time. I've already done it as well. So for that one, I'm happy to incorporate your preferences, but
I will stay on that one.
thank you.
But I do have another question with the mayor. Since Rachel's on the GSA, would she want to switch with me for the Water Advisory Committee?
The Water Advisory Committee is the citizens group, it's like the Citizens Advisory Committee.
Yeah, the WAC. It actually goes side by side with the GSA.
Oh, really?
There's a lot of.
That doesn't matter.
Once
Come here.
you agree, Colleen.
Yeah, I hope you're ready.
First, the GSA and the WAC talk extensively about water issues. You know, one's very focused on groundwater, but being on one does help you interact with some of the same folks and get your head around the water situation, all the places we get our water in Sonoma.
You can bring it up with her. You're talking about transportation.
I'm going to leave it the way it is for now, and I'm going to ask you to coordinate. Are there any other comments?
Yeah.
Councilmember Harvey?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I can put my full effort into the things that I'm on and all that. So I'd feel more comfortable being the alternate on transportation and then learning and then maybe the next year switching and being the city representative. If that's comfortable with you, if it's not, then I'm happy to do it. I just want to make sure I have time for everything.
Well, I would just note that you have no other major appointments. That would be your only one.
Oh, that's
and
true.
to the extent that you've been asked to contribute your time, perhaps you could make time for that. But
okay.
And I would imagine that you and Councilmember Agramani could figure out perhaps attending together for some period of time.
That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, we can work that out. So we'll leave it, I guess.
Thanks.
I just want to know on the audit committee, do I need to know how to count?
I think that you would be good for the audit committee because you are the person who is asked the most about the
Reserves and-
financial reserves, and that is gone over in detail. And so I think
No, and that's great.
that would be a good role for you to play.
The Sita Slow thing is the thing we're thinking about canceling. Cheetah Slow. Okay.
The one that will stay in place, and when you are called upon, be ready. Be ready. Well, there was I mean, for people who are interested in like food things, there was the slow food movement that was very popular about like 7 years ago. It was actually really interesting, and Sonoma was at the forefront of that, and that had a lot to do with.
And some other cities are very involved, Sebastopol in particular.
And I think it's like about heritage. Heritage lines of vegetables and also animals, and then also farming practices that rely on, anyway, more natural farming and less pesticides and biodynamic farming. It's actually, if we did it, it is really interesting if you're interested in food production, which at one time I was deeply interested in. Yes.
Sounds delicious.
So the other thing I just would like to bring to everyone's attention, the Sonoma, at the bottom of the first page, Sonoma County Health Action, Santa Rosa, first Friday.
Yes.
That's, the round table is here at the hospital.
Okay.
And then there's a Health Action Committee. I don't remember how often they meet, but that's the one with the health department. So it sort of says the same thing. But the next page, number 1, is actually that health, I forget what it's not this health roundtable.
There's one with that city manager and police chief. And then there's this one that you have been on with the city manager previously.
Well, maybe this is the police chief then, is that Kathy? The one on the second page at the top? Is
Yeah.
that the one at the hospital? Because they both say roundtable and that's not right.
Yeah, you know what, I apologize, there's like 3 of these things, or 2 or 3 of these, and I get them a little befuddled.
Health roundtable,
The
as I know,
health roundtable
is
does
at the
meet,
hospital.
does meet at the hospital, and that is, I could probably look it up in my
Probably
calendar
bi-monthly or something.
quickly. And that does meet, they tend to meet monthly, and it is here. And then there is this Sonoma County Health Action Council that does meet in Santa Rosa.
Right. So that one.
So I think these could be split. But it would be great, the Sonoma Valley Health, the second one, the Health Roundtable,
That's at the hospital. But they both say health roundtable.
yeah, so there's,
Well, I guess I was thinking that as a former member of the hospital board, that the health matters are your
No, I'm fine with it,
bailiwick.
but it's incorrect.
Oh, okay.
That's what the problem is. There's the health roundtable that meets at the hospital, and then there's Health Action, which is Santa Rosa.
yeah,
So
so let's.
that's not,
Let's say the bottom of the first page for clarification, should be the Sonoma County Health Action Council. We'll cross off Sonoma Valley Health, and that's up in Santa Rosa.
because the roundtable is right.
And then the roundtable, Sonoma Valley Health Roundtable, they meet, but that one is in Sonoma.
This is the same thing, though. Then there's, because somewhere in this is the health action. And it meets with the different agencies. So I think
My-
the one on the second page might be wrong.
Yeah, my recommendation on both of these, Mayor Harrington, would be maybe to put, because there's two things. There's this local health team that comes
Roundtable.
together, and then there is a county effort. And I don't think we from time to time there's been participation at the local roundtable. The county one, I'm not sure we've gone to. We do get minutes, which I think is helpful.
I used to go to that, and I don't know why, I don't know why the police chief, I don't see him
I think it
being
might
at
be
that.
better off to have potentially Mayor Gramonte be our representative on both of those, and then Maya
And
is the
that's
alternate.
okay, I'm just saying it's wrong.
Yeah, and we can correct this.
If that is the case, then I think having Councilmember Agramani on that, both of them would make sense.
And then put
If
me
she's
as the
willing to do it.
alternate.
Yeah.
Is there
Okay.
another question?
I'll confirm that. Because my understanding was that one of these was a staff level, not a council level.
Well, how about we
which was-
just
Find out.
figure that one out?
If,
Yeah.
if something comes up on a change on one of the commissions and the committees, because we don't always get notified as
Right,
staff
I'm
that
sure.
that's happened, it would be really helpful if you would let us know that. And if you find a contact for Chittislow, because the one that we had and has been on the thing is when I called it to try and verify information, they basically told me they had no idea what I was talking about. So.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll figure it out or we won't.
So Health Action meets at 490 Mendocino. And those are, I think they may be monthly, and that's where all the agency come. So we can find out what that is.
Okay. So, council members, we're going to close this item. Council member reports and comments, and I'd like to make my comments about this now. Oh, okay. So, during the year that I'm the mayor, I'll be handing out proclamations not during the meetings, but just at events or privately. And instead, I would like to honor 1 to 2 people per meeting that are just regular citizens of Sonoma that are doing well. And I would invite each of you, fellow city council members, if there's somebody you would like to honor, feel free to bring them and you can give them you can honor them. I wouldn't do it, and you can each do it. And here is a sample of like the type of certificate we would be giving them. And so if you have somebody that you would like to bring to the city council to honor and recognize, all you have to do is let Rebecca know who you want to honor, and then
John Smith, I know him well.
we already have his done. Just let Rebecca know who your person is, and then we will make the certificate for them, and then you can let them and their family members in the community know, and then they can come down for when your person is honored, and then you will do it here, and hopefully we'll get the opportunity to honor a number of great Sonomans during our council meeting. So I will start that
Good idea.
at the next meeting, and I hope that you all have people that you would also like to honor at the city council.
May I add one thing?
Oh, yeah.
Mayor Harrington, as we discussed today, if you please do that, we'll keep a list of ongoing members. If everyone puts in 2 the first meeting, we'll put a list together, we'll keep that. But please, please, please get your person or nomination or person to me by Monday prior to the council meeting, because we will have to put that in the council packet as far as the name.
So, does anyone else have any council member reports?
I just wanted to, what did I want to share? Oh, well, I think I talk about this quite a bit, especially with respect to building housing here in Sonoma. And because of the appeals, obviously, that has slowed down to a huge stop, a huge, a very low speed, which is really tough because obviously every one of us have talked about housing, affordable workforce, transit, ADU, granny units, all of those things. I just wanted to let people know, I've been talking about the legislator coming in and taking this ability for us to build. That legislation is coming. And if we don't find a way to be able to work with everybody, we're going to be hit with things that we don't want to have to do in our lovely town. For example, I think our new governor, Gavin Newsom, has actually said recently, I sent that to Kathy, he is for affordable housing, but if we don't do it, he wants to go after our SB1 money. That's big. And I think the transportation people are going after, a working group or trying to find another way to compromise. This is serious stuff. The legislature, and I even think the Board of Supervisors, I'm not blaming anybody. It's just the way we are right now, but it's bad. And, they may tell us to build homes the way they want us to build homes. So I just want to share that. I think our chickens have come home to roost.
Any other council member reports? No? City manager?
None tonight, thank you.
City attorney?
Just in the interest of time, just one very quick one. Within the last 2 weeks, the State Secretary of Resources has passed the new CEQA guidelines. So there are some changes in the new CEQA guidelines for the council to be aware of. They deal with things we knew were coming, changes to greenhouse gas emission evaluation criteria, the changes now to we know what the changes now to the CEQA guidelines relative to VMT, vehicle miles traveled, are going to look like, even though they won't go into effect until 2020. We at least know what they're going to look like so we can see how they come forward on the horizon. There are a few other significant changes in the CEQA guidelines that have now been published and approved. I won't go into all of them. Energy is added as a criteria, so that's another significant one that is a change over and above what we had previously been doing. And then a lot of them have to do with clarifications to rules, regulations actually, that have been in effect for quite a while, but they're trying to codify, if you will, case law changes that have come down since the last publication and changes to the guidelines. They are available online on the state's website as published, and we'll be looking at implementing these as we move forward in reviewing projects on a prospective basis. So that means that a project that begins after the effective date of the new guidelines, which is now, will be using the new ones, but that does not apply retroactively to past projects.
Thank you. All right, with that, the meeting's adjourned.